Hey guys, it's the WalterFootball.com After Dark show for July 5th, 2024. Actually, 53 minutes until it's July 5th. So happy July 4th to all those who celebrate. We're going to be talking about fantasy football running back sleepers. We're going to do a deep dive into all the rosters and try to figure out the best running back sleepers. And we have a great guest to do that with. But before we get to the introductions, please hit like, subscribe, comment below, share this video, visit the link in the description for the merch store. All that would be really appreciated. And as you can see here, we have a ton of shirts in the merch store. We have it's almost January, and sorry, it's almost August rather. And August is Gluttony Month here, and yeah, you can buy your Gluttony Month T-shirts. We have. And as I always say, like these are like $18-$19. That's pretty good in this economy for a high quality T-shirt. We actually had Cassandra, one of our listeners, said that these shirts last a long time. Cassandra said they've had their shirt for 5 years or something like that, with no holes or anything like that, and they last forever. So even if you don't like the messaging or anything like that, you can just get like high quality shirts for $18 or $19. So which I think is pretty good. So you have that here. Also, please consider super chats, super stickers. As I always say, YouTube ads pay absolutely nothing. So super chats, super stickers are a great way to help support the show. We've had some great ones recently. John Sanders and Germ in the past episode contributed. We had Slew recently as well. Degeneron, Kevin Kovac with some great super stickers. So yeah, you guys have been so awesome. So any further contributions in that way would really be appreciated. Also, you can buy my book on Amazon. It is called Jerks of the College Years. So I have a section on the site called Jerks of the Week where I just make fun of people. I see it like, the grocery store, the gym, etc., around my neighborhood. I just make fun of these people, and I just have a good laugh here. And it's the same thing, just basically from my college years. I spent 6 years at Penn State. So as you can imagine, I've had many run-ins. We have 6 here, one for each year. Event at Penn State. So yeah, so you can buy this book. It's like I said, another great way to support the show. So we are joined today by Ben Wassley from FFD Fantasy Football, Fantasy First Down. Ben, how are you?
Hey, happy 4th of July, or as we say down here, happy afternoon of the 5th of July.
Nice. I was going to ask you, do you have anything similar to July 4th in Australia?
Yeah, well, so we have Australia Day, which is basically where we recognise when we got our independence from our British overlords as well, which is January 26th, although there is some issues around that because it also represents the same date when we invaded, and so a lot of the native people find that kind of offensive. So it's kind of one of those things where there's some questions over whether we should change the date, and some people don't like it, but we do have our kind of same thing, and of course there's always controversy around it.
Oh yeah, we have that here. People always want to change dates and names of holidays. It's just stupid. Just have fun. I think I think that's the best way to do it. Cassandra's here. Says, "Yep, it's true. They hold up really well." Last time the shirt, I was talking about the Beasley one, which is my favorite of the ones I have. Yeah, my Cole's Body, Cole's Choice is one of the shirts we have there at the merch store. I'm currently wearing a Pedo Pete t-shirt, and some people do get it. They laugh and they're like, and others are like, what's that? Yeah, it's an inside joke here. So yeah, it's another shirt you can get here on the merch store. But yeah, let's. So what we're gonna do today is we're going to go through the 32 rosters in the NFL, do a deep dive of it, and try to find the best fantasy football running back sleepers there are. You did a video on your channel about fantasy football running back sleepers, and that kind of like inspired this video here. I thought the video is fantastic. I thought there were like some great recommendations. One threw me off. Not that you were wrong, but like the person you mentioned as the backup, I thought was the starter. But like I could understand that. Like I'll get to it. I'll understand. I'll get to like why I thought that. Because it has to deal with an injury. So yeah, we'll get to that. But I think that like maybe we can find some other sleepers to get to and try to find some gems in the late rounds because, as you said in your video, like this is how you win your league. Like you can't really win your league early. You can lose it with some horrible draft choices and busts. But you win your league in the middle rounds and the late rounds. That's where the success comes from. So if you want to talk about that for a second, your video and the running back sleepers and whatnot.
So firstly, last season was actually a pretty good season for the health of running backs. There were less running back injuries last year than usual. And yet, of the 27 actual backup running backs in the NFL, situations where it was obvious who the backup was, 15 of those 27 saw the field as a starter at some stage during the season. So if you've got that guy on your bench, you've suddenly got a starter from 1 week to, in the case of Kyren Williams, essentially a whole season. So it's worthwhile getting these guys onto your bench if you can pick the right guys. Now, we can't pick who's going to get an injury, but we can definitely predict who's going to be the most productive when that injury happens. So, for example, it was pretty obvious last season that Kyren Williams is going to have more upside than a Matt Breida, for example. So while both of them saw the field, you want the one that when they see the field is going to have that every down role, is going to turn into a league winner for your fantasy team. So it's better to stash them on your bench rather than fighting it out with everyone else to try to get them off waivers when the opportunity actually arrives.
Yeah, I think having that sort of guideline for the running back sleepers to find could be really helpful, and it could really help win your league. So yeah, let's get into 32 teams. We're just going to go in order here on our lads. They have such great depth charts, and we'll go division by division. So we'll just go downward, over and downward. So we'll start with the Buffalo Bills, and we'll look at the running back depth here and try to figure out like which of these running back backups are the good ones to have, and like whether you should draft them like late or mid rounds, or maybe just ignore them completely. So behind James Cook, you have Ty Johnson, you have Ray Davis in the 4th round, you have Darrington Evans, Frank Gore Jr. I know Frank Gore Jr. will member berries there because Frank, his dad was such a great player. But Ray Davis is the obvious name here. Is a 4th round rookie. Obviously, you don't know what you're going to get out of him, but I can't trust like Ty Johnson. He just doesn't. Even if James Cook goes down, it's like I'm not rushing to pick up Ty Johnson. I think Ray Davis has the best upside, and I listed him on my sleepers page, just as a sleeper entirely, not just as a running back sleeper. So you like Ray Davis, right? As potential, even if James Cook doesn't get hurt, like he's going to get some goal line carries. So I think he has some upside to begin with without any possible injury to Cook.
Yeah, I agree. I think the way they've listed this depth chart is a little bit deceptive, in that Ty Johnson was kind of the 3rd down running back, certainly the 3rd and long running back at times last season, and he may still have that role this year. But I think we're talking about like 10% snaps in this sort of situation. It's going to be James Cook and Ray Davis. And we don't know how much James Cook's going to be used, but they haven't shown any indication to suggest they're willing to use him as a true every down running back. They gave Latavius Murray a lot of touches last year, and Ray Davis is taking over that role. And he should be very good at that role. He's a big power back, and he's not a bad receiving back, honestly, either. He possibly could get the receiving work over James Cook. And certainly if James Cook gets an injury, and that's very possible because he's a running back, there's like a 50% chance of any given running back getting an injury. If Cook goes down, do we really think that Ty Johnson's going to have a fantasy relevant role? I don't think so. I think it's going to be Ray Davis getting 70 to 80% of the touches. And that's fantasy winning touches, especially in this high-powered Bills offense. So I think that Davis is going to have some value as the goal line back, as getting change of pace touches. And then if James Cook goes down, all of a sudden you've got a league winner on your hands. So useful in bye weeks if you're absolutely desperate for someone, and then a league winner if something happens to Cook.
So Ray Davis's ADP right now is 166 overall, which is it's about the 14th round. Is that an area where you draft them maybe a little bit earlier?
I think that most of the time, I think in most leagues, you're usually drafting 16 players, and I feel like you're getting your kicker and DST in the last 2 rounds. So we're basically talking your last offensive player. So if you're drafting well, you want your last 3 or 4 plays just to be upside guys, and I usually want them to be upside running backs because you're more likely to get production out of your upside running backs. than your wide receivers. So I feel like Ray Davis is someone I'm probably taking with maybe my second last overall offensive pick and stashing him on my bench, knowing that I've already got all my starters set and I just want as much upside on my bench as possible.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. Quacky says that Barry Sanders is still playing for the Lions. And then he says, wow, I just screwed that joke up. Hi, guys. Hey, Quacky. He says, I feel like Derrick Henry will fall below expectations this season. I agree with that. He's 31 years old right now. And he was splitting touches with Tajay Spears last year. There were games where, he's going to be 31 at some point this season. He's splitting touches with Tajay Spears last season. Like, there were some games where he's getting like 10 carries, 12 carries. Yeah, he still had some like 18 carry games, but I think that he's going to disappoint for the most part for those who still believe in him. And I spoke about member berries. Like, they're going to remember Derrick Henry's great games with the Titans, but he's just not quite there and anymore. And also, Baltimore lost 3 starting offensive linemen this offseason, so their blocking is not going to be as great anyway. So, he has the job himself right now. And we'll get to Baltimore in a bit, but I don't like Henry this season. What do you think about him?
Yeah, I have to agree. Towards the end of last season, he was getting under 50% of the snaps, and most of the snaps he was getting were those early down run plays, but they weren't exactly high opportunity plays. Some of them were around the goal line, admittedly, but there were plenty of those like 1st and 10 plays where he's going to get you 5 yards, but there's limited upside to that. You're really not getting a lot of receiving points from that. You're not getting a lot of goal line points. So for that reason, I am scared about how Henry's going to be used. I feel like he's probably still going to be getting 15 touches a game. But even if he's doing that, he's really only getting you like 8 or 9 points, depending on your scoring settings. And you have to feel like you're still going to see a lot of Keaton Mitchell and you're still going to see a lot of Justice Hill in the receiving work. So I agree. I feel like there's certainly the opportunity for him to disappoint here.
Yeah. And speaking of Barry Sanders, as we move to Miami, so it's like 2 years after he retired, there's still people in fantasy leagues drafting him in like the last round, just on the hopes that he would come back. And like I said, this is 2 years after he retired, not just 1 year. That's how great he was. And he was well missed, and he retired way before his time. I guarantee those boomers who still drafted him, and those are like older guys. I still bet that, if he announced that he was coming back, which sounds absurd because he's so old, they'd still draft him in the last round just because they remember him. Yeah, the member berries, like I said, third time bringing that up, like they are real.
It's true. That name recognition makes such a big difference. And I still see people drafting Tom Brady in leagues. Tom Brady's like taken in a lot of my dynasty leagues as well, because people just hope that he's going to come back and somehow be productive.
Yeah, I have a Tom Brady Elite Rainmaker card that I refuse to sell or to craft, and I'm just like, it is a number 1 out of like, if you don't know, Rainmaker is like the serial number matters for tiebreakers. It is a number 1, which is usually like really valuable. And I just can't get myself to do it, because every time I click the sell button, I'm like, what if he comes back? I have this number 1 Tom Brady. I just can't do it. Yeah, exactly. I know. Yeah. Quacky says, Oilers, Titans, great backs. Would you take Henry or the great Earl Campbell? I would take Earl Campbell for sure. I mean, Henry had some amazing seasons for the Titans, but I think Earl Campbell is better for sure. But especially for over the course of his career as well. But yeah, we can go to Miami here. So messy depth chart here. Raheem Mostert's listed as the starter, but I think Devon Achane is probably the starter. They're going to split touches. You have Jalen Wright, another 4th round rookie. You have Salman Ahmed, aka Salmon Head, as some people like to call him. You have Jeff Wilson Jr. All 5 of these running backs could get work. Probably not Ahmed, but 4 of these guys will get touches. It's such a crowded backfield. I feel like Achane's overdrafted right now. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. And I would think Mostert is the backup. Kind of curious where Mostert's being drafted right now. Mostert, his ADP is 89 overall, so that's not even a great bargain. And Achane, his ADP is 21 overall. So I don't have much interest here, because even if one of Achane or Mostert goes down, Jalen Wright is going to get some touches, but still he's going to have to split the workload there. Wright's going to need 2 guys to get hurt. So I don't see much here. What do you think?
Yeah, this is the sort of situation, I think, where people get caught up in the fact that Wright's probably going to score more points than a lot of the backups that we're drafting here, but he doesn't have the upside for a lot of points. I feel like no matter what situation happens here, you're going to have a 3-man backfield. I think probably out of the gate, we're probably seeing Mostert get about 50% of the snaps, Achane getting about 40% of the snaps, and you see a little bit of Jalen Wright. And then as the season goes on, you probably see Wright rise up into that 20 to 30% snap range. And you have to feel like that at some point Mostert's going to start to fade away. But I don't want any of those guys. That's not enough snaps to really be reliable as a fantasy option. There are going to be games where they rush the ball 40 times or something insane, and all of these guys are going to get touches, but not on a weekly basis, and you're not going to be able to easily predict when that's happening. The biggest issue for someone like a Jalen Wright is that even though those points seem really tempting, you have no idea what weeks he's going to be really lucky and produce a lot of touches because they're winning by a heap. Same thing as with Achane last season. And even if there's an injury ahead of them, they will bring Jeff Wilson in and they'll use him. They will bring Salvon Ahmed in and they'll use him. Even if Achane and Mostert go down, I still think we probably see a 3-man committee. That's just how they want their running backs to look. And that makes me really scared of all these guys. The only one that interests me even remotely is Raheem Mostert, and that's not in a dynasty league. That's just in redraft. If I go 0 RB, for example, and I'm drafting in that 8th or 9th round and Mostert's sitting there, I can at least think, well, look, he's going to get me some starts until my better players come off my bench and take over starting jobs. So I can at least get through the start of the season that way. But there's no way I'm touching Achane. I think Wright's just a wasted pick.
Agreed. Most of its ADP is 805s. Doesn't sound that bad. Achane is kind of ridiculous in the second round. But yeah, I do agree that Mostert is the best value for sure. And I think you hit the nail right on the head. Like if both Mostert and Achane go down, like Wright isn't going to be guaranteed those touches. Salmon Head, Jeff Wilson Jr. Like this Chris Brooks guy will get work. Like that's how they do in Miami. They love to spread the ball around with the running backs. So which makes you question why they surrendered a 3rd round pick in 2025 to get Jalen Wright. I don't quite understand that decision, but we'll see what they have in mind with him. Sue says Campbell Bum would run him 30 plus times a game. Yeah, it's a different era now. It wasn't too long ago. I think it was about 20 years ago that Larry Johnson had 416 carries in a season, which is unheard of now. Like you would never see that anymore. But yeah, I mean that's even the century. So yeah, it's like I feel like that would happen so frequently, where these running backs would run 30 plus times a game. And they were durable for the most part. Like look at Emmitt Smith, like he lasted forever. So yeah, it's strange how the NFL has changed. Quack says Salmon Head. Yeah. I love that. I can't take credit for that. I heard that from someone. I can't remember who, but it was another football podcast listening to. Matthias says sleeper pick Alexander Madison. Powell crap doesn't strike twice. We'll get to Madison in a little bit, but Matthias's are a Vikings fan here, so I can understand why he's calling him a pile of crap. Let's get to the third team in this division, the Patriots. Now, they have backup running back. I mentioned him on our Hidden Gems show. So we did a show on Monday about Hidden Gems. These are guys that are going undrafted that may have an opportunity to kind of explode if they have like the circumstances go their way. And I actually thought Antonio Gibson would be undrafted, but his ADP was round 12. So I mentioned him as an honorable mention. But he's right behind Ramondre Stevenson. And this is an offense where Ezekiel Elliott had some nice performances as a PPR back down the stretch last year. And Gibson at the moment, it would be better than Elliott. I mean, Elliott just decrepit at this point. Like Gibson is a better receiver at the backfield at the very least. So I think that Gibson, if Stevenson were to go down, Gibson would have some nice PPR upside. And he's going to catch passes anyway. Even if Stevenson doesn't go down. So I think he's one of these running backs that you should have interest in. His ADP is around round 12, as I said. So I like him. I like him a decent amount. So what do you think about Gibson here? Or really any other running back maybe? So what do you think?
Yeah, in this situation. Yeah, look, Gibson kind of scraped into my top 10. It is notable that Zeke finished as a top 30 running back last season, or just on the edge of the top 30 as a running back last season. And Stevenson did get injured for a little bit of that, but Elliott was still getting touches every week, and he was still being like flex worthy in a PPR league most weeks. So Gibson's going to have some value. He's going to get a lot of receiving work. Depends on whether they really trust him as a blocker, but I think that they will. The thing that scares me about this is Stevenson's massive contract. If they hadn't given Stevenson that enormous contract, I'd think, well, at least Gibson has some upside. Maybe he could potentially take over the starting role or turn this into a committee. I feel like they've kind of forced themselves into making Stevenson an almost every down back now. You're not giving someone that big long-term contract if you're not planning on using them and kind of feeling that money's forcing you to put him on the field. So that scares me a little bit. The upside is at least that if Stevenson goes down, and we know that he is, I wouldn't say injury prone, but he certainly gets some injuries. He's a running back. Gibson's going to come in and be that guy. I really don't think you're going to see a lot of Kevin Harris. You'll see JaMychal Hasty just for that third of long sort of situation that we talked about with Ty Johnson. I feel like Gibson would be the almost every down back in that situation. So there's some upside. The biggest issue for me is the Patriots. They're not a high-scoring offense. You are limited in the amount of touchdown production you're going to get. And while they're going to run the ball a lot, I really don't know that you can really rely on Gibson being a true league winner. So that's why he falls behind quite a few of the other higher upside guys like Ray Davis.
I don't understand that contract. Sandra agrees that that effing Stevenson contract, what a stupid move. I don't get it. It seemed like the person who made that decision is managing the team like it's 2005 or beforehand, where paying these running backs made a lot of sense, and now it really doesn't. Especially I can understand if it's like a Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, someone like that, but that's not Stevenson. Like Stevenson's solid, and he's not bad, or he's not okay. He's a good player, but he's not great. So I don't understand that move at all.
Yeah, agreed. It makes absolutely no sense. It's just another case of the Patriots giving a lot of money to the wrong place. They do it with wide receivers usually, and now they've started doing it to running backs as well, which is an interesting transition in that process. Not a good move. Christ says no take Josh Jacobs. I like Josh Jacobs a lot, but we'll get some Packers soon. So the final team in the AFC East, we have the Jets. Obviously, they're Breece Hall, arguably top 2 fantasy pick, and if you take him number 1 overall, I won't hate it. Just based on what he saw or what he did last year in the second half of the season, like he was posting like Marshall Faulk type receiving numbers. It was truly amazing, and he's a great talent. And now he's going to be a year further removed from that torn ACL, so I'm expecting a big year out of Hall. However, they drafted 2 guys on day 3 in April, Braylon Allen, Isaiah Davis. And that doesn't say anything about Breece Hall. I think that says more about Israel Abanikanda. I just don't think they like him very much. So I think they're going to give Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis some opportunities to win the number 2 job. Braylon Allen, obviously, you have to like him more because he was drafted earlier. He has receiving upside as well. So if Hall goes down, he's going to be pretty good. I don't know if I'd draft him. He's going undrafted right now. His ADP is like in the 18th round. But if you're in a really deep league, then I would have interest. But a standard 16-round draft with 12 teams, I don't think he quite makes the cut. But he's someone I would definitely try to stash. If like all your sleeper picks bust and there's no one out there, like I like picking these guys up with high upside, because if Hall were to go down, like everyone would be going after Braylon Allen. So he's one of those stash guys or like high priority waiver guys, I think. So what are your thoughts on the Jets backups? Look, the Jets love Braylon Allen. There have been already 3 different reports coming out saying how great he looks, how he looks explosive, how he's way past Abanikanda already. They haven't even mentioned Isaiah Davis as well. It's all about Braylon Allen, a lot about his receiving work and how impressed they are with his receiving work, which is great news because he's also a big back and he's going to be viable on the goal line as well. So I don't really think it's going to affect Breece Hall too much. Breece Hall's still Breece Hall. He's still very much a top 3 back, arguably top 2. So I think that Breece Hall's pretty locked in. But if Breece Hall goes down, it will be really interesting to see what happens here. My perception is that if Breece Hall goes down, Braylon Allen takes over the exact Breece Hall role. He gets all the goal line touches, he gets all the receiving work, and Davis is a backup, and Abanikanda is still hardly involved. So that makes Allen a really interesting late round pick to me. He's one of my favorite true late round handcuff picks, where you're drafting the guy not because he's going to be productive during the actual season, but because he's going to be extremely productive if the guy ahead of him gets injured. And that's what I'm hoping would happen. I won't say I'm hoping for Breece Hall to get injured, but that's why you're drafting him. So I'm taking him in the last round of redraft drafts. I'm taking him late in dynasty drafts and stashing him on my bench, knowing that there's a massive amount of upside if things go right. And even if Hall's only out for a week or two, all of a sudden you've got a guy who's going to be explosive. He's going to get a lot of touches in the 1 or 2 weeks that he's in.
Yeah. I could see drafting him in the late round. Like I said, he's not being drafted right now, so you can probably wait to the waiver wire if you want. But I think that he's definitely a guy with a ton of upside that you could draft super late. Greg says the Jets remember Chad Pennington. He looked like the kid from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer that wanted to be a dentist. Yeah, he did have that look. He was so accurate when he came to the NFL in 2002. The Jets, I think they started like 1-4, 1-5, and then they rallied with Pennington and they made the playoffs and they beat they shut out the Colts in the opening round. It's like 41-0, if I remember correctly. It was absolute domination. And then they held the lead against the Raiders early. It was tied at halftime, and then they lost in the second half. Pennington had this meltdown in the second half of that game, and the Raiders went on to the Super Bowl that year. Pennington looked so good, and then unfortunately he had so many injuries, so many shoulder injuries in his career. So he just fell apart. But do you remember Pennington at all? That was, that was about 22 years ago when they made that run to the second round of the playoffs.
Yeah, look, absolutely not. I think I was probably playing Madden back then, but not very well, and I didn't understand what I was doing. That's how I learned NFL, is basically just playing Madden, working out the rules by playing it. Back when there were fewer pixels than there were plays in the game, so yeah, it was a bit hard to work out what was going on. But I have very little memory of Chad Pennington. I have many memories of shoulder injuries, so I can sympathize with him. But yeah. Sense.
Yeah, me too. No, I think a lot of people learn football. It's playing Madden and stuff. It was a while ago, but yeah, I haven't played Madden in a long time. But I used to play all the time. All right, we jump divisions now. We stay in the East though. We have the Cowboys here, and talk about, mentioned before, Miami has a messy running back situation. This, I don't know what to say about this. Ezekiel Elliott's their starter for some reason. Rico Dowdle, I thought was the starter, but he's listed as the second string. I don't understand why. You have Royce Freeman, Deuce Vaughn, Snoop Connor, Malik Davis, Nathaniel Peets. I have no idea who that is, but yeah, all these guys. I would never draft Elliott. He's washed up. Dowdle, I have interest in. Not if he goes early, but he's not going early. His ADP right now is it's 152 overall. So that screams great value to me. Now he's someone I wouldn't. If his ADP was like 8th round, or like if he was considered the starter, he'd be like 8th round, 7th round. I don't think I can go there. But getting him late, I think is pretty interesting. Although you can't really count on him being the starter eventually. For Elliott, it could be Royce Freeman, it could be Deuce Vaughn, it could be Snoop Connor for all we know. It wouldn't shock me if any of these guys had most of the workload, and also they could trade for a running back still, or if someone's cut, they could sign him and suddenly that player is the starter. So there's that danger with Rico Dowdle, but in the 13th round where he's going, I think that there is some upside there for sure. Dallas's offensive line took a hit, so the blocking isn't going to be as good with the two starters gone, Tyron Smith and Taylor Biadasz. But Dowdle, I think in 13th round is a fine choice. What are your thoughts on this mess of a running back stable they have here?
Yeah, I think you summarized it perfectly. I think Rico Dowdle's probably the guy that you're going to want here. He was pretty much the clear backup last year, and I think they're seeing him a bit as the Tony Pollard to the Ezekiel Elliott. and it is still to the Ezekiel Elliott now that Zeke's back. I feel like Dowdle is going to take over the more valuable role. I don't know how many touches he's going to get. We know that Zeke's pretty good in pass protection, and he's a solid receiving back, and at least he's reliable in that role. So it might be that Dowdle's not so much a change of pace back, but certainly that more explosive back, and they give Zeke kind of the grinding early down work and also more of the receiving work. I'm hoping that as the season goes on, we start to see Dowdle get more touches, but he'll need to play like Pollard did. He'll need to show that he deserves more touches. But I certainly think that he's in that second role at the moment. I don't think there's too much of a threat from guys like Royce Freeman, but I do think if Zeke goes down, we might see Freeman get more involved or whoever else they sign. Potentially, but I think it would probably be Freeman, that sort of situation. He's a guy that I really like if you're taking that zero RB strategy, because you know that you can rely on him to get enough touches to at least get you over the line. I feel like he's going to have some sort of role, even if it's only 40 to 50% of snaps. That's better than anyone else you're taking in this range. I actually got him in the 4th round of a rookie draft a month or two ago. So he was going after guys like Frank Gore and people like that. That's how much people are overlooking him. He's not really in people's thought processes. I don't know who people think is going to be the starter here. I have to assume they're thinking it's Zeke, but that doesn't really make a lot of sense. I think it's going to be very messy. This isn't the Cowboys of a couple of years ago. So Dowdle I like as someone reliable, and I think you're going to get really good value where you draft him. I just don't know that he's a true league winner.
Yeah, I agree with that. And like I said, I think it might be the case that the running back who gets the most carries on their team this year is not on the roster at the moment. Could be someone caught at the deadline right before the season. They pick him up and suddenly he's their starter. It's pretty easy to integrate a running back, so it might look different. But yeah, I think there's some potential with Dowdle, but I think you're right. Like he's not. I don't think he wins anyone their league. So just think about that, I guess. Quack says, I remember that run. That was, I think that was Herm's. You play to win the game. I'm sure you heard that quote when Herm was the head coach of the Jets. He's like, "You play to win the game." He had that tirade during one of his press conferences. I think it was that season because they started very slowly and then they caught fire at the end. And then Quack says, "Dude, I think this is going to be Ezekiel Elliott's coming out party this year." I know you're joking, obviously, but yeah, I'd be shocked. Elliott right. He's looked cooked for a while. All right, so we move to the Giants, who I expect to be one of the worst teams in the NFL this year. Devin Singletary is starting running back. They have Eric Gray, Tyrone Tracy, a bunch of guys no one's ever heard of. But Tracy, we talked about him the last time you were on the show. I like Tracy a little bit, but 5th round rookie, there's no guarantee. There's still Eric Gray there to deal with. Like, I'm not drafting these guys. Even Singletary, like I just don't trust the offensive line. The only Giants player I'm drafting really is Malik Neighbors. I don't have any interest in anyone else on this team. I think this team is going to be dreadful. So, what are your thoughts on the Giants?
A couple of things. Firstly, I think that possibly Devin Singletary is the main guy from a running back perspective if you take that zero RB approach, because you can get him. When's he being drafted? To around like the 8th round or something like that. Like you can get him pretty late. So I do feel like he's probably the last every down running back that's actually going in drafts. So for that reason, there's at least a little bit of floor there that I like, but I don't know that I'd be going out of my way to get him. Tyrone Tracy is interesting. The main reason I'm interested in Tyrone Tracy personally is because there's a guy that works with me at Fantasy First Down who every year he just gives me one guy and he says, "This is my guy this year." Last year it was Puka Nacua. In the past, he's got like a 50% hit rate because the year before it was like Trey Sermon. So it can go either way. And he's just bashing me over the head with Tyrone Tracy. So I've kind of been forced to look into him a lot. And I kind of see the upside there. I think he possibly is the backup, but I expect they're going to give Singletary most of the carries, and there's limited upside there, but at least he's safe with that floor. The thing that interests me most is there's news come out recently that said that they're expecting Brian Daboll to be taking over the play calling, and that could make them a little bit more pass heavy potentially, could make them a little bit more like the Bills a couple of years ago. So I don't know whether that affects things. Did you hear that news? Did that give you any thoughts about what we can expect to see from the Giants?
I heard the news. I don't know. I mean, it is a positive, I think, but at the same time, I really hate their offensive line outside of Andrew Thomas. Illuminor is okay, but the rest of their blocking is so horrible. I just don't know if it really makes a difference who's calling the plays, because if you can't block, you're not going to score many points anyway. So, yeah, like I said, the only guy I'm interested in is Neighbors. Singletary's ADP is 810, which looks appealing, but I feel like usually the last running back starter who is always drafted always feels like, oh, you're getting a great value, but it always seems like they never pan out because they're in such a bad situation. You know, like if Singletary were in a better situation, he'd be going much earlier. And I think there's a reason why he's lasting till round 8. And like, yeah, he looked great in Houston last year, but remember his time in Buffalo, like he had some really bad seasons, so he could regress. And I don't know. I think round 8's like a fine place to take him if you really need a running back, but I'd rather just look elsewhere. I really don't want anything to do with these Giants outside of Neighbors.
Yeah, I would only take Singletary if the rest of my roster is loaded, but I have no running backs. So if I need to fill a starting running back spot, then I would take Singletary, because I don't need upside in that case. I just need someone who's going to start. Whereas if I've already got 2 starting running backs, then I need to start looking for a lot more upside, and I'm probably just going to wait until later on and take the upside guys that we've been talking about.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Cassandra says I trashed Eckler in an article last season and then probably drafted him in the first round. Paid the price for that hypocrisy. But this year, he's in the 8th round or so. That seems okay. Do you agree? Yeah, I think it depends if it's PPR. I like him much more in PPR because we're going to get to Washington in a second here. But I think Eckler has this negative stigma for what happened last year. But if you remember, he had a great first game against Miami. It was just look at the numbers. Like, he was outstanding. And then he got hurt in that game, and then he missed a while, and he came back. But he was not 100% when he came back. You could tell. And so I think people are just looking at his season last year, remembering how bad he was, but he was not healthy. So he's going to be healthier this year. So I think that there is some potential for sure. So yeah, 8th round, I like for Eckler, and more so in PPR. What are your thoughts on Eckler? I mean, might as well just get to Washington right now because we're talking about the.
Yeah, let's jump straight to Washington. Yeah, look, I don't know. I find it hard to really trust Eckler after what we saw last season. I don't think he's actually the starter. I know he's listed there as the starter, but I feel like he's essentially that Gibson role. He's the passing down back, and he will get a little bit of early down work. I actually quite like Brian Robinson. I feel like there's upside there. I feel like their offense in general is going to improve. I think Cliff Kingsbury could do some really positive stuff with them here. I like the fact they've now got a running quarterback. I feel like that's going to open up a lot more lanes for them and give them a lot more opportunities. The fact that Daniels is not exactly a check down quarterback, the fact that he's capable of scrambling and means that he's not going to have to use Eckler that way is a little bit scary when you've got a receiving running back who doesn't have a check down quarterback. So that's a little bit of an issue, but there's at least upside with Eckler, because if Robinson gets injured, you're going to see a little bit of Chris Rodriguez, but all of a sudden you've got Eckler being the true starting running back and more of an every down running back. The same thing if Eckler goes down, all of a sudden Robinson becomes very productive because he becomes that every down running back. So I think even though this is a committee, they both have upside. So if you can get them late enough, it's valuable. I just don't think the 8th round is late enough to be getting the value given how much risk there is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely see that. Robinson's interesting too. Like you said, it helps that they have a better quarterback now, not Sam Howell. Like they're actually gonna have to respect the pass, opposing defenses. So that'll definitely help Robinson. Also, they found 2 upgrades on the offensive line, Biotish and Nick Allegretti. So they're gonna block better this year. So they had severe issues blocking last year. So that's not gonna be an issue. All right, let's jump to the Eagles here. And obviously, they Saquon Barkley. He's going to get most of the workload here. Kenneth Gainwell is the backup, but Will Shipley is a 4th-round rookie. They wanted to draft a running back because their depth wasn't that great. So it's going to be one of Gainwell, Shipley. I can't see myself drafting these guys. If obviously Barkley goes down, you're going to want to jump and get either Gainwell or Shipley, probably Gainwell, but until then, I have no interest in these guys. What are your thoughts?
I find it really interesting when we were going into the draft. I remember there was one of the early news things that you had on your draft buzz was that the Eagles wanted to draft a running back, and they wanted to create that sort of not necessarily thunder and lightning, but certainly a two-man committee situation that we've seen them do at times in the past as well. And I thought maybe that was meant to be Shipley, but it's hard to see how exactly he works with Barkley. They're not exactly opposite backs to each other. They kind of like Shipley's shifty and he's quick, but I mean, that's kind of Barkley's game as well. So I don't really know that he offers something really different to Saquon to make you go, well, we'll put you Shipley in these situations and use Barkley in these other situations. It feels more like Shipley and Gainwell just create this awkward committee backup situation, and that makes me kind of scared of really going with either of them. I really hoped that they'd go for kind of like a true two-man approach, and then the rookie becomes interesting. But it feels like Barkley's going to be the guy. There's been news coming out recently that we should expect Barkley to kind of have a McCaffrey-style impact on the Eagles. And I know that Barkley's not as good at McCaffrey at this time as it in his career with the injuries he's had and everything. But we know that the Eagles can block. We know that their run game should be productive. And I feel like Barkley's going to be the guy that you're going to want out of this backfield.
Yeah, I can see him having that sort of impact. I mean, think about it. Like, he's been running behind that horrible Giants offensive line his entire career, and now he gets a top 5 offensive line. So and he's going to have a good quarterback by his side for the first time. So it's a massive upgrade for him, and I think he's going to have a great season. And he's one of the many reasons the Eagles are the only team I've really bet so far to win the Super Bowl. Just really high on them at the moment. All right, so now we jump to the AFC North here. The Ravens, we talked about Derrick Henry before. Behind him are Justice Hill, Keaton Mitchell, and then Rasheen Ali. I would like Keaton Mitchell if he weren't coming off a torn ACL. That's the problem there. But he's not an every down back. Like, he's one of those guys who's going to get maybe like 10 touches each week. And he can go the distance anytime he touches the ball. He's like just super explosive, but he's not every down back or anything like that. And then you have Hill and Ali. Like, I feel like if Henry goes down, there's going to be like a 3-way workload here. So that's why I'm not really interested in any of these guys. And frankly, I don't like Henry either. So with a team that lost 3 starting offensive linemen in the offseason, just no real interest here. What are your thoughts on the Ravens backfield?
I can imagine in a non-PPR league, if Henry falls a little bit, I might be interested, but I don't think he's going to get the passing down work he was getting at the end in Tennessee. I don't think Keaton Mitchell can be relied upon to be anything other than a change of pace back, and we know who Justice Hill is. He's their third down back, so it is really a committee, and you kind of expect that out of Baltimore. That's kind of what they've been giving us the last few seasons, and even if Henry goes down, there's no one that's clearly going to step in here. This is one of those backfields where there is no backup. I do think Rasheen Ali kind of takes on a lot of the Derrick Henry style work, but you probably see more of Keaton Mitchell in that situation and more of Justice Hill, and then it's just an even uglier committee with no Henry there than there was when you had Henry there in the first place. So I'm avoiding all of these guys. Henry only interests me in very specific situations if there's really good value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, go to Cincinnati now. We don't really know who's the starter. Zach Moss is listed, but they have Chase Brown, who impressed late in the season. I assume Zach Moss is going to get first crack at it, but frankly, this is something that can interchange throughout the year. It could be a 50-50 split. Chase Brown's ADP right now is 1009, which seems okay. You know, I want to get my sleepers like round 12, 13, 14. You have to start taking your sleeper around 10. It's not the worst thing. That's usually like where I try to get my quarterback, like around 8, 9, 10, something like that, or maybe my starting tight end if the value's right. So I don't know if I'm going to be getting to Chase Brown unless he falls to like the round 12 range. What are your thoughts on the Bengals here?
I can't imagine a situation where I'm going to see Chase Brown and think this is the best option that's available to me. I do think this is going to be a committee where Zach Moss gets 60% of the touches and Chase Brown gets 35% of the touches. And then you see a little bit of Williams and Evans. The interesting thing is going to be what happens if one of them gets injured. If Chase Brown gets injured, I could imagine Zach Moss being an every down player. We saw him do that for the Colts last year and do it quite successfully. Obviously, the Bengals don't have the same quality of O-line, but we do know that Zach Moss has at least shown the capacity to do that. If Zach Moss goes down, does Chase Brown become an every down back? I don't know that he has that in him. I don't know that we've seen that from him, and that scares me a little bit. So for that reason, I don't think that upside is as obvious to me. I think it's possible, but I think there's also a chance that if Moss goes down, it's some sort of committee where no one becomes valuable. And for that reason, I'm not willing to take a chance on the backup.
Yeah. If you're going later, I would have interest, but I do think it's going to be a split of some sort. Like I said, the other team in Ohio. Now, this is the difference we had when you mentioned the starter, because obviously Nick Chubb, when he's healthy, is going to be the starter. But I kind of forgot that Nick Chubb was there because he's coming off that brutal knee injury. And to me, like in my head, I'm like, Jerome Ford is the starter here because I imagine he's going to start at least the first half of the year. I don't see Chubb playing until like November. Now I've heard some good reports, but man, that knee injury was so brutal. So they might put him on the PUP list, and then we might see him in the second half of the year or something like that. So it like in my head right now, like the first half of the season, Jerome Ford is the starter. And if that's the case, you're looking at D'Onta Foreman. D'Onta Foreman is the only guy that Kenny and I agreed on in our Hidden Gems article as a guy that you can get undrafted, who doesn't have an opportunity right now. But if the stars align, he could be a league winner. Like we saw him in Houston, just having great performances. We saw him in Carolina, like putting some great numbers together, and then Chicago, he had a couple of good games. This is a guy who's never had this great of an offensive line in front of him, and he's shown the potential to just go off. And Jerome Ford, while he's had some good performances, it was weird how they used him last year. Like there were some games where I think it was against the Colts or maybe it was against someone else. Like they gave him like 7 carries on the first drive, and then he didn't play until the third quarter. It was just so weird. And then there are other games where he was just mixed in more than that. But I don't quite understand what they were doing. Like Ford's not the most talented running back. He's just okay. I feel like he's just another guy. And I think that Foreman has a chance to, maybe win the job, or if Ford were to go down as well. Suddenly, I think Foreman would have a great chance to do really well. So again, I'm not going to draft him unless it's like super deep league, but like 12 team, 16 players. He's just going to be in the back of my head as like someone I'd maybe want to stash, or if Ford are going to go down, I would try to get him immediately, assuming Chubb's not healthy. So all that said, like if Chubb comes back, this is all moot. And suddenly like Ford becomes like the backup you want. But assuming that Chubb's not ready to go, I have interest in Foreman as like a stash guy at the very least. What are your thoughts here?
In my video that I did the other day, Jerome Ford was my favorite late round running back because he is still going in the late rounds. I think there is enough fear that Nick Chubb comes back that people are willing to leave Jerome Ford. But we're talking about an offense where the running back does tend to be very productive. I am a little bit scared in how they're going to use Ford, as you said. I think D'Onta Foreman's there only if Nick Chubb's not available. I think if Nick Chubb's not available, Foreman becomes active. I think if Chubb is available, Foreman's probably inactive on game days. We saw him inactive at times last year. I feel like he's a guy, because he doesn't really play special teams, who can really only be used on the roster if he's one of the top 2 running backs. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how they use him. The fact that they brought in a guy who doesn't play special teams kind of indicates to me they're not convinced about Nick Chubb, because otherwise there's no point in having Foreman on your roster in the first place. So that's what gives me a lot more confidence in drafting Jerome Ford, who I do think would be the clear starter if Nick Chubb's not there. I think Foreman would have a role. We certainly saw they weren't willing to give Ford the full load last year. They brought in Kareem Hunt in that situation when they didn't need to. If they were willing to trust Ford, they wouldn't have brought Hunt in. So that scares me a little bit. We did see a little bit of Pierre Strong last year, and I feel like that's just because he was the special teams guy. I do think that Foreman's clearly ahead of Strong, but I still like Ford the best simply because we don't know what's happening with Chubb. Ford's got a clear upside to a starting role, and we know it can be a productive starting role. So it's all a bit messy. The only guy I'm drafting here is Ford, unless we get really positive reports about Chubb.
So is Ford's ADP is 10-12. So I take it you're drafting him there?
Yeah, I think that's when I start taking my backups, is around the 10th round. because by that stage you've fleshed out your roster and you need to start getting guys with upside. I feel like Ford has enough upside for me to want to take him. He was the running back 16 last year. I feel like if you have a reasonable chance of getting a guy who can be a top 20 running back in the 10th round, 11th round, you should definitely be doing it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Yeah, if you start hearing like hints that Chubb's going to start the year in PUP, then well, obviously Ford's ADP is going to rise. But if you can get him in the 10th round, I would definitely recommend that. But yeah, and at the same time, I'd have interest in Foreman as well as a guy to add at some point during the season. All right, so Pittsburgh, it's kind of weird situation here. Although I'll say this: if you ask Arthur Smith, he'll tell you to draft Cordero Patterson because he used Patterson over Bijan Robinson at some point last year. But you have Najee Harris, Jalen Warren. Like I feel like these aren't like Warren's not a backup. This is like 1A, 1B. So and like Warren is not a late round guy. So I mean, there's really nothing here as far as our topic is concerned, right?
Yeah, look, Jalen Warren was my favorite sleeper last year. He's not even someone I'm ever considering drafting this year because the upside's so low. If Najee Harris goes down, Jalen Warren can't play every down. He doesn't have that size or that skill set. They're going to get Patterson involved. So the upside's not there. If Warren goes down, I think Harris at least has that upside of being an every down back. So I've got Harris ahead of Warren for a couple of reasons, but I don't really want either of them. And I think I'll probably end up with 0 shares of either of these guys.
Yeah, same. All right, so we go to the so we have DeAndre Swift as the starter. They paid him a lot of money. They have Khalil Herbert, Roschon Johnson, and Travis Homer. I don't know if this is legitimate. It was someone in our chat. They posted a report. I think it was John Sanders. I think he mentioned a couple guys on the Athletic saying that Khalil Herbert's roster spot was in jeopardy. Now, I don't know how good these reporters were. I didn't look into the story. Probably should have, but it's holiday weekend. It's been super busy. But yeah, if that's true, if Herbert is on the roster bubble, then I suddenly have a ton of interest in Roschon Johnson because DeAndre Swift is going to get hurt. Like he always gets hurt. Detroit bailed on him for a first-round rookie running back because they didn't trust him. Now, he stayed healthy for the most part last year, but I don't see lightning striking twice again. So I think that Roschon Johnson, if that's true about Herbert, I love Roschon Johnson because I like his talent coming out of school. I thought he was a good prospect. They took him in the 4th round. So yeah, what are your thoughts here? Obviously, if it's not true and Herbert's there, it's really messy. But if Herbert gets cut, then Roschon Johnson looks great to me.
Yeah, look, I want a lot of Bears on my roster. I feel like the Bears are going to be sneaky good this year. I do wonder how it's going to happen with the backfield if Swift goes down. When Swift goes down, I guess you could say. I am scared it's going to be a committee of both of these guys who are on the roster. And I think even if Swift goes down, we also see a fair bit of Travis Homer as the 3rd down back as well. So I'm avoiding both Herbert and Johnson like the plague, simply because I don't know who the backup is. If Khalil Herbert does miss out on a roster spot or Johnson misses out on a roster spot, all of a sudden they'll be a lot higher on the other guy because all of a sudden you can feel very confident they're going to be a 70% snap guy when Swift goes down because we don't know who it will be at this stage. And I haven't heard any of those reports about Herbert missing the roster spot. I just looked it up on RotoWorld and there was no mention of it there either. So I don't know anything about that. If that report comes out and it is reliable, obviously that's going to change a lot. But at the moment, these guys are being drafted not even in the last few rounds. These guys are being drafted in 10th, 11th, 12th round, something like that. There's so much more upside available to you elsewhere. I just don't have any interest in either Herbert or Johnson. I recommend not putting them on your roster because they're just wasting a roster spot at this stage.
Yeah, let me I can pull that up very quickly. I just Googled it. Yeah, it says here, Adam Johns, the reporter. I'm not familiar with – I've heard the name before. I'm not familiar with how good of a reporter he is. It says Adam Johns reports Khalil Herbert could be odd man out for the Bears running back roster. So yeah, Khalil Herbert on Bears roster bubble. So yeah, I don't know how reliable this reporting is, but if it's true, then I would try to draft Roschon Johnson because like both of us said, Swift always gets hurt. It's a matter of when, not if. And yeah, again, this is the way to get ahead of the game, I think, to get like Roschon Johnson 13th, 14th round. because he's going to be starting at some point if Herbert does get cut.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. Like I said, look, I haven't heard anything about that. I'll look into it, but it's not news that I'm trusting yet, and it's not affecting my rankings yet. I think it is also notable that they're probably going to take 4 running backs plus a fullback into the season. That would be a pretty normal thing to do. And there's really only 4 actual running backs on their roster. So unless they're signing someone else, I can't imagine how Herbert would miss out. Because last season they had 3 running backs and a receiving back. So I would assume they'll do something similar here. And it would be very strange if they dropped Herbert because there's no one obvious for them to bring in to replace him.
Yeah, it is odd. I don't know. Maybe they see something we don't, because I think Herbert's pretty talented. I was kind of surprised to see that. But anyway, let's move on.
Times last season, so it seems weird that he'd go from lead back to nothing. But I mean, they did have Foreman inactive at times last season, so it's possible he makes the 53 and he's inactive on game day. So who knows?
Yeah, it's a very weird situation. So it's something to monitor. Let's move on to Detroit. I doubt we have anything to talk about here because this is another 1A, 1B situation, except it's a much better situation. You have Montgomery and Gibbs, and I feel like Gibbs is going to get more touches than Montgomery this year. If both were to go down, suddenly you have Craig Reynolds, Sion Vaki, Jamar Jefferson. I feel like they'd sign someone at that point. No interest otherwise. I mean, again, like for this topic, not much to say here.
Yeah, we saw last season when one of the top guys went down, Reynolds wasn't valuable. Do we even know if Barkey's going to be playing running back or safety yet? Like, are they?
We don't know that. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't even know what role he's going to have. So, look, I have no interest in any of these guys. It's Gibbs and Montgomery, and if either Gibbs or Montgomery goes down, the other one just becomes massively valuable all of a sudden. So that's kind of what you're hoping for when you draft Gibbs or Montgomery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So we have Green Bay coming up here. Josh Jacobs obviously has the starting job locked up there, and he's more durable than Aaron Jones right now at this stage of their careers. So whereas Jones was always hurt last year, and that gave AJ Dillon a ton of opportunities that he turned nothing into. Josh Jacobs is probably going to be on the field for most of the season. Now, if he gets hurt, you have Marshawn Lloyd, third-round rookie. You still have Dillon there. I don't know why he's still there, but he's still there. And then Emmanuel Wilson. So Lloyd is I'm pretty confident he's going to beat out Dillon for the RB2 spot just because Dillon is so bad. And so, if Jacobs goes down, something I have interest in Lloyd. Would I draft Lloyd late? I probably not, just because I think Jacobs is so durable. But again, he's like one of those guys that I think about stashing, like a Braylon Allen sort of deal, where I draft my sleepers. Maybe they don't pan out, and then like week 2, week 3, I'm like, hey, let me just stash Marshawn Lloyd. Let me stash Braylon Allen. Like that's the sort of situation I feel like is with Lloyd, because I really despise AJ Dillon. He might be the worst running back in the NFL who had opportunities last year, like a lot of opportunities last year. It's just he was so dreadful as a running back. So I'd be shocked if Floyd doesn't beat him out for the RB2 spot. So what are your thoughts here?
I mean, firstly, I do like Josh Jacobs in this situation. We've seen that being the starting running back for the Packers can be really productive. I know that Aaron Jones is very talented, but so is Josh Jacobs. And he's still pretty young. He's only 26 or something like that. We kind of thinking of him as a guy who's been around forever, but he came into the league very young, so he's still got a lot ahead of him. So I do like Josh Jacobs in this role. This isn't a veteran presence just there to help the young guy. This is Josh Jacobs as the starter, and the backup is one of these guys behind him. Now, I think Marshawn Lloyd is probably the main backup, but Marshawn Lloyd is not exactly the perfect prospect either. He's not very tall. He's not very strong. He's not a good blocker. He's got issues with fumbles. I mean, AJ Dillon's not great, but I can imagine a lot of situations where, especially in pass protection, you might prefer to have someone like an AJ Dillon or someone else entirely out there rather than Marshawn Lloyd. So I'm not sure exactly what role Lloyd would have if Jacobs goes down, and I'm not confident it would be an every down role. I feel like it would turn into an awkward committee, and I do think that there's the potential that they'd bring a veteran in when ultimately neither of these guys work. So for that reason, I'm not putting Lloyd on my bench. I just don't think there is an obvious, definite path to a backup role if Jacobs goes down.
I do like Braylon Allen better than Lloyd. So in the the flow chart in my head, when I get to like week 2, I think I'm adding Allen before Lloyd, but he's still gonna be on my radar. That's just how much I hate AJ Dillon. Like I don't know. I think Lloyd is gonna get the work there. Although you're right. I mean he's not like he wasn't my favorite running back prospect. He is a short, compact guy. He's gonna run through carries. Once upon a time, Dillon was seen as a great prospect. He was a second-round pick. And remember that Tennessee game on Sunday Night Football? He looked like Derrick Henry. He was awesome. I don't know what happened to him. He's just gotten worse every single year. And like I said, I don't even know what he's doing on the roster at this point. But I just hate Lloyd. I hate Dillon that much. John says, just got here. Happy 4th, everyone except for that Mahomes loving Australian.
Nice. I'll get the hat, John. You know I'll do it. You know I'll get the hat.
Jay, John, how are you? Hope you had a great holiday. Okay, let's get to Minnesota, the final team in the NFC North. We have Aaron Jones as the starter, but man, like I said, he's very, very injury prone at this point of his career. You can't trust him at all. When he's healthy, I love him. He's so productive, but you can't trust him. You have Ty Chandler, who I thought looked decent last year, or maybe it was that like Alexander Madison was that bad that like Chandler looked good by comparison. But I thought he looked okay. You have Kenny and Nwangu, Myles Gaskin, like these guys have had some workload, especially Gaskin. We've seen him start some games before, but I think if Jones goes down, or rather when he goes down, it's going to be the Ty Chandler show. Kind of curious about his ADP. I can't imagine that he's getting drafted. Yeah, well, his ADP is 138, so he actually is getting drafted. His ADP is at 1206, so actually higher than I thought. 1206, you start taking your sleepers around 11, 12, 13, 14. You take your final 4 picks, your sleepers. I'm not in love with this pick, but I think it's okay. If his ADP is like 13th, 14th round, I'd feel better about it. I don't know about him as like my second sleeper, So what are your thoughts on Minnesota's situation?
I think this is going to be really interesting. We haven't really seen Aaron Jones at any point in time be a true workhorse running back. He's been very efficient. He's been very effective, but they never give him like 90% of the snaps. He's always working in conjunction with another back. And you'd imagine that's probably what they've got planned here. There've been a lot of reports around Ty Chandler having a significant role in this offense. And I would expect that it's probably 55% Aaron Jones, 40% Ty Chandler, and a little bit of random other guys other than that. So for that reason, Ty Chandler's the least valuable because on a bye week, you're probably going to be able to use him and at least get, 5, 6, 7 points on your average week. And that's kind of useful to have on your bench if he is someone that you might need to stick into your starting lineup. If you just want an upside guy, I think he's got plenty of upside as well. I think if Aaron Jones goes down, there's no one else on this roster that I have any interest in at all. I think it would be Ty Chandler's backfield. If Jones gets a serious injury, there's always going to be that risk that they bring in someone else and it becomes a committee again. But I think we've seen that Ty Chandler can handle a rather heavy workload. He was good at times when given the opportunity last year. So I kind of like the upside of Chandler. He's definitely a top 10 late round running back to me. The fact that you have to take him a couple of rounds early scares me a little bit, but if you like the fact that he's going to be able to give you at least baseline production even when Jones is healthy, then he's someone worth taking, especially if you've got a weak running back roster.
Yeah, I think you said it right there. Like, to me, if his ADP is like 14th round, I'd feel a lot better about it. But 12th round, it's a little too early for my liking. But if he falls to me in the 13th, I might take him, depending on who's still available. All right, let's go to the AFC South. We have the Texans starting here. Joe Mixon was signed. Dameon Pierce is the backup, but he was the starter at this point last year. Just fell out of favor. I think even I forget who it was. It might have been Bobby Slowick. I don't know. Maybe it was Demeco Ryans. But they said that Dameon Pierce is just not a good fit for their offense. So they said that at some point last year during the regular season. So Singletary took over. Pierce was back on the bench. So knowing that, like the fact that they don't like him that much, like even like if Joe Mixon were to get hurt, I I'm not convinced that Pierce would get the full workload. Like, I think he'd be like he'd be getting like more carries than anyone else. But you still have Dare Ogunbowale getting the third down work. You have Jawar Jordan, 6th round rookie. Maybe he gets mixed in. So I'm not in love with this. I don't think I'd draft him. Obviously, if Joe Mixon were to go down, I'd try to sign Pierce, but I wouldn't be spending, if you're in a fab league, I wouldn't try to be spending most of my fab on Pierce just because they said take it from the horse's mouth. Like they said it that he's not a good fit for their offense. So it's a weird situation because he was so productive as a rookie and then suddenly he just wasn't. And I guess it's just a bad fit. So what are your thoughts on the Houston situation?
I think it's really interesting. There has been a little bit of buzz coming around the positive stuff coming out of camp about Pierce, but it's hard to say that's anything but coach speak and just them propping up their players because that's what coaches do. I feel like Pierce's first season, that real breakout season, was a little bit a case of getting a lot of touches and therefore being productive because of how many touches he got. I want to say in his first season, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I believe he had the 3rd most carries in the NFL or something like that. And he wasn't a top 12 running back. So he was getting a lot of touches, but he wasn't overly effective on those touches. And he certainly was getting a lot of rushing touches and not high-value rushing touches rather than the receiving work that can be really beneficial in PPR. So if Joe Mixon goes down, and that's possible, I think Pierce is going to have limited upside. I certainly think he's a better option than a lot of other backfields where it's just going to turn into a bad committee. But you're going to see some Ogunbowale or Jordan, and realistically, they probably bring someone else in if Mixon's out for the season. So I think that Pierce is someone that I would only want on my roster if it's a really deep roster and my running backs suck. And I just need someone who's going to turn into like a 50, 60% guy if the starter goes down. I can't imagine many other situations where I'd want him, and I certainly wouldn't be paying a lot of fab to get him if Mixon goes down during the season.
Yeah, it's an odd situation. As Sue asking, is Cam Akers out of the league? Yeah, he's currently unsigned, but yeah, he's still young. He could get signed at some point. John saying I'd rather have Singletary than Mixon. A couple years ago, I would have definitely said Mixon, but it seems like Mixon's on the decline, whereas Singletary just had a great year. So what are your thoughts on this? Would you do you think Houston made a mistake by not keeping Singletary, or what are your thoughts?
I don't know. I think we've seen that Mixon can handle that every down load a little bit better. Singletary's small. He's one of the smallest, shortest running backs in the league. I think he's 5'7" or something like that. So we're not talking about a big back. And I think that possibly for what Houston wants to do, that's not exactly an ideal fit for them. They kind of want someone in between. They don't want the big back like Pierce, but I don't think they want someone tiny either. So I think that Mixon fits in that right range for what they're aiming to do. But I thought it's weird they went and got an older guy when they could have easily gotten someone young and filled that similar role with someone a little bit cheaper, I guess. I guess when you're not paying your quarterback a lot of money, you can afford to pay your running back a little bit more. I definitely, for fantasy, want Mixon over Singletary simply because I love this Houston offense. But I agree, if I were Houston, I think I probably would have just hung with Singletary unless he wanted too much money.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Yeah, we agree there. So we go to Indianapolis. Jonathan Taylor, obviously entrenched as the starter. He held out last year. Then he had a couple injuries. But yeah, it looks like Trey Sermon's this is the RB2. You have Evan Hall, Tyler Goodson, Xavier Scott, Trent Penix. I liked Evan Hall last year, and then he got hurt. I thought he had a chance to take the starting job when Taylor was holding out. Obviously, he got injured, then, it turned into Zach Moss eventually. But, Sermon is listed as the RB2. I'm not a big Sermon guy. So, and I know that he's currently ahead of him, but like Evan Hall to me is someone interesting. Now, obviously when draft him, you don't need to. But if you just want to stash him, if he wins the RB2 job, and this is all fluid, he's one of those handcuffs that become valuable because if Taylor were to go down, I think that he'd be in a great situation because the Colts have such a great offensive line. So whoever this RB2 is, maybe if it's Sermon, then Sermon too. I think this is one of those guys that you just want to stash on your roster and just hope that the starting running back ahead of them is out for a few weeks and you get to have a great situation, maybe a possible trade candidate. But so who do you like here between Sermon would you just ignore this situation?
I don't think you can ever fully ignore the Colts backfield because it doesn't matter who the starter is for the Colts. They're going to be productive. We know Jonathan Taylor's been good for years. Zach Moss looked fantastic when given the opportunity. But even when it was Trey Sermon and Tyler Goodson last year, they were still really productive. They were still running at like 6 yards a carry or something insane like that. So you do kind of want the backup here because they are going to give you a little bit of upside. The problem is we don't know who the backup is. There was a report out within the last week that it seems like, at least at this stage, Trey Sermon is definitely the number 2 running back. But there's still a long way to go, and I wouldn't be surprised if Evan Hull takes over or if it turns into more of a committee situation. So if I was going to take one of these guys, I'd take Trey Sermon, but they're pretty close together for me in my rankings. And I certainly think from a dynasty perspective, there's probably a little bit more upside with someone like an Evan Hull because we haven't seen what he can do. We've kind of seen that Trey Sermon's in general pretty average. But I think if you just want someone who's a true upside handcuff, I'd go with Sermon because I think he's most likely to get the first crack at that role.
Yeah, definitely a situation to watch as the summer unfolds and we get to training camp a few weeks now. So Jacksonville's next. Is another team where they have Travis. They have an entrenched running back, Travis Etienne. D'Ernest Johnson is listed as the RB2, which I think is interesting. And then you have Tank Bigsby. There is a negative report about Tank Bigsby, just saying that like he's not showing any explosiveness or anything like that. So, whereas Bigsby was a 3rd-round rookie last year, he had some upside because we haven't seen him, but it looks like he's just not going to develop into anything. Obviously, things could change. He's still young, but at the moment, no interest there. D'Ernest Johnson had that. Remember that great Thursday game he had against it was against the Broncos when he was Cleveland's 4th-string running back or something. Chubb go down, Kareem Hunt was out, and then D'Ernest Johnson came in and he just had a great performance. So I kind of think of that. I'm like, okay, maybe they have something with him here, but this offensive line is not as good as Cleveland's offensive line, so I wouldn't quite be expecting that. So. To me, just this is a situation where I'm not interested unless maybe Keelan Robinson maybe looks great in the preseason. Then you're like, okay, maybe he's going to be the RB2, but otherwise just going to ignore this situation. What do you think?
Yeah, it was really interesting in the last preseason. I remember the start of last season, there were a lot of reports coming out where they were like, oh, we need to take a lot of the load off Travis Etienne. We don't want to give him too many carries. And Travis Etienne himself is coming out and saying, yeah, look, they want to keep me healthy. They're going to use a lot of the other guys so that I'm not getting too many carries, so that I can be explosive, so I can be good in the offseason. And then he finished as the running back too in fantasy. It was really strange. I don't really understand exactly what they were doing there, but it was very obvious against everything they said in the offseason that D'Ernest Johnson was the clear number 2. Tank Bigsby was getting 1 or 2 snaps a week. And now they've come out in the offseason and again, they've said, oh, we want to get Tank Bigsby more involved, blah, 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 blah. But all the reports out of training camp is that Tank Bigsby doesn't look good. In fact, there have been reports that he's looked worse than he did in OTAs last season. So it's hard to know exactly what to make of this. I think that Johnson is the clear number 2 here. I feel like Bigsby is just a backup to Johnson, and would get probably the goal line carries and those early down carries occasionally if Etienne goes down. I don't want either of these guys, frankly, on my bench. I just don't think we know exactly what's going to happen. I think you probably want Travis Etienne again. I don't think there's a lot of quality behind him here.
Yeah, I'm not feeling it there. John says they'll probably sign Dalvin Cook. Is that I assume Jaguars? Dalvin Cook has to go somewhere. Maybe Dallas signs him. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, he looked washed up as well. But
do we want Dalvin Cook now?
No, no, definitely not. By the way, the easiest fade last year, I took Dalvin Cook under rushing yards in that game against Denver, where the report came out that Breece Hall would be unshackled from the constraints that they had him on like the first few weeks of the season coming off the torn ACL, and then Dalvin Cook's rushing yards, his prop was like 27. I'm like, if they're going to give Breece Hall all the carries, like there's no way Dalvin Cook is going to get to 27. And that was like the easiest under of the year. He got to like 11 rushing yards. It was so great. Just like, you got to look for these opportunities. I think you can get them sometimes if you pay attention to the news because the sportsbooks don't quite adjust all the time. Tennessee's next. This is another 1A, 1B situation. Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears. Good luck trying to figure out which one's going to get the most. If they were both to go down, you have Hassan Haskins, Julius Chestnut. Not really anyone I have interest in. This is not a great offensive line. It'll be better than it was last year because they spent their first round pick on a lineman, J.C. Latham, and they signed Lloyd Cushenberry. So better blocking, but not great blocking, and especially given that we don't know what Latham is going to do. We've seen these Alabama tackles kind of flop in the NFL. Not all of them, but quite a few of them. So he could be the latest bust. We just don't know. So yeah, I mean, I would love Pollard or Spears if they were just by themselves, but you just don't know the situation. So whoever is going later of the two, I would have interest in, but outside of that, just very confusing here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm avoiding this altogether. I can see that there'd be plenty of upside if one of these guys goes down, but if you're going to gamble on an injury, you want to be paying a late round pick for it. And you're paying like a 7th, 8th, 9th round pick, depending on your league. You're not going to get enough production out of either of these guys when they're both healthy. And you don't know who's going to get injured or if either of them is going to get injured. So I will take neither of these guys in any leagues. I will have zero Pollard, 0 Spears. Sorry.
Okay, that's interesting. So Pollard, he's being drafted at 90 overall. That is at round 8, pick 6. And then Tajay Spears is being drafted at 901. So yeah, no interest of Spears in the 9th round.
No, that's kind of where I expected they'd be drafted, and you can that's like Devin Singletary range. Who would you rather have, a committee back in a mediocre team, or a workhorse back in a mediocre team? I mean, there's no question.
Yeah, I hate the Giants so much. I actually think Tennessee is going to be better than people think. The problem is that the AFC is so brutal. If the Titans were in the NFC, I think they'd have a chance to finish around like 8-9, something like that. But they're going to have a lot of losses in the AFC. But I don't know. It's a tough situation. It's just because I hate the Giants so much. But it's truly a toss-up for me, really, between all three of those guys. I like you, I'm probably not going to go in that situation unless maybe weird things happen. Maybe Spears falls the 11th round. Suddenly, you're going to have an opportunity there because if Pollard were to go down like today or tomorrow, Spears. Where do you think Spears would be drafted? Like 3rd, 4th round, maybe 4th round, probably.
Interesting. I don't know. Where would he actually be drafted? I feel like he probably still makes it to around the 5th round, and then suddenly you've got some value there. Because I think people are going to be scared off by the lack of name recognition. I think if Spears goes down, then Pollard's probably going to be drafted a little bit earlier because people do get overly attached to name value. And I feel like in most leagues, you're going to see Pollard go earlier than he should. I think ultimately that's still going to happen. I think his ADP is actually going to rise as a lot more of the less knowledgeable fantasy players start getting in and influencing ADP. I feel like Pollard probably rises, and you might see some value for Spears.
Yeah, I think Pollard's round 3 and Spears is 4, maybe 5, depending on how smart your league is. So, yeah. All right. Yeah, let's jump to the next division. We have Atlanta here. A big name backup here with Tyler Algier. Like, we've seen him perform well when given the opportunity. Now, when Bijan's healthy, he's not going to have much of an opportunity, but he'll still get worked in. Not as much as last year because Arthur Smith's not there anymore, but he'll still get some touches for sure. And then in the case that Bijan goes down, and running backs do tend to go down, Algier is going to be just this premium backup, and I think he needs to be rostered in every league. Like he's like one of the best backups for fantasy. So Tyler Algier, I can't quite find him. Oh, there we go. Yeah, he's being drafted 160th overall. So 14th round, 1404. So, I would have interest in him there for sure. What are your thoughts on Algier?
Yeah, I'm going to have a lot of him by the sounds of it because I would probably be thinking that he deserves to go around the 12th round. I think there's more upside there than there is with the vast majority of backs. We know he's the clear backup. They'll either use Avery Williams or Jace McClellan as a third down back if Robinson goes down. But Algier is going to get 70% snaps, something like that. And this offense is going to be a lot better than it was last year. I feel like they're going to be running more plays. I feel like they're going to be passing more. I feel like they're going to be moving the ball more. And you want the running back in that sort of offense, especially when I think they're still probably going to be chasing games occasionally. So I definitely want Algier. I'll take him in a lot of leagues. I think I'll have a lot of him, a lot of Braylon Allen, and a lot of Ray Davis.
Yeah, I like that strategy. Like I said, if Robinson goes, let's play that game again. If Robinson were to go down the torn ACL tomorrow, where does Algier go? I think as high as the second round, just because everyone knows his name, and just from that year in 2022, and just the great situation he's going to be in.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you kind of look at the other guys going around that range and you think, yeah, this is where Algier probably should go. I think probably third round is where he'll actually go. I think second round would be a bit early, but if you could get him in the third round in that case, I think you'd be stoked with that. And for that reason, you want to have him on your bench because you're essentially getting a third round player for free if Robinson goes down.
Yeah, when I said second, I meant like 210, 211. I think anywhere between like 210 and 307. So I think that's like where it goes.
Who's current? What running backs are currently going in that range?
Good question. Okay, so we have Devon Achane, Derrick Henry, and Josh Jacobs. I don't know why Josh Jacobs is going that late. And then Rachaad White.
Yeah. See, I feel like I'd probably take Jacobs or Rachaad White over him, but I would take him over Derrick Henry or Devon Achane. So
yeah,
I feel like that's the right range for him.
Yeah, for sure. John says Hassan Haskins wasted fourth rounder. Yeah, definitely looks like it. And Sue says I take Algier as early as the 10th round. Yeah, I agreed. And like we said, like around 11's like where you start taking your sleepers, or depending on the strength of your league, like maybe around 10. So yeah, I mean, Algier is going to be one of the few sleepers that you're going to take early for sure. So yeah, we're in agreement there. We jump to Carolina now. It's kind of hard to gauge who's the starter right now because Chuba Hubbard is listed as the starter. Brooks at some point will be the starter, but he's coming off the torn ACL as well. So I think this might be a Breece Hall situation where Brooks either doesn't play in the first half of the year or he gets very few carries. And then maybe in the second half of the year, he goes off. So I don't know if you're going to get quite the value here, although, Brooks is still being drafted like relatively highly considering the injury. He's being drafted at 87 overall, which is at 804. And to me, a guy coming off torn ACL, just I don't really have much interest there in Brooks. As for Hubbard, he's being drafted at 150th overall, which is 13th round, mid 13th round. So given that Brooks may not even play, and according to reports, like he's not going to be ready for training camp, like given that he may not play for a while, Hubbard in the 13th round seems like a pretty good value as far as I'm concerned. And also Carolina's offensive line is going to be so much better. They signed a couple of guys, Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt in free agency. They paid those two guards a lot of money. They're going to have a better offensive coach and Dave Canales, and they added two good receivers in Deontay Johnson and Xavier Legette. So teams aren't going to be able to stack the box as easily as they were last year. So I think Hubbard, 13th round, as long as like Brooks is still dealing, it's not healthy at all. Like, who knows? Maybe he makes some miraculous comeback, but again, he's not going to be ready by training camp. So like Hubbard in 13th round seems like a steal to me. What are your thoughts here?
I think it's really going to depend on your situation. So when you're drafting, you've taken a couple of good running backs in the early rounds, not necessarily hero RB, but certainly in the first 3 or 4 rounds, you've taken 2 running backs. You're not starting Chuba Hubbard in that situation. You probably already got all your starters sorted, and you're not going to need somebody until week 5 when the bye week starts. So in that case, is there a point in taking Chuba Hubbard? Well, probably not. The upside's very much capped. Even if Jonathan Brooks had never gone to the Panthers, I think we're probably still only taking Chuba Hubbard around the 7th or 8th round. So that's kind of what you're expecting if Brooks is out. Having said that, if you're doing some sort of zero RB strategy, or certainly if you have a weak running back room and you're unsure about the viability of your starters, I would definitely take Hubbard late then. I think you're getting fantastic value because there is significantly more chance that he has a fantasy relevant role than most of the other guys you're getting in that range. So I think it depends on what your roster looks like to that point and what you're filling your bench with. There's nothing worse than filling your bench with guys that even in the best case scenario won't play for you. Whereas if Hubbard's someone that, if he's the starter, would go in as a starter for you, then you should definitely be picking him up.
That's a great point. It certainly depends on the situation. Now, I mean, if I were confident Brooks wouldn't play at all this year, coming off that injury, then yeah, I think that would change for me because he's going to play for you during the bye weeks and stuff. But I feel like Brooks will play at some point. We just don't know when. By the way, Rashad Penny's on this roster. I had no idea. I had no idea he was still in the league. This is interesting. Not that you should be drafting Rashad Penny, but I thought that was funny. Maybe
that's so weird. The Rashad Penny fall from grace was very sudden and very strange.
It was. Remember, he had a great finish that one year. He was getting tutored by Adrian Peterson. It's like, wow, like this guy might be something, and no, definitely not.
Yeah, it's just why you should value running backs really low, especially in dynasty leagues. You never draft anyone but the best running backs because everyone else could have that happen to them. It's so much more likely than for a wide receiver.
Yeah. John Essing, a couple questions about Miles Sanders. Panthers aren't going to keep their most expensive running back on the sideline. Miles Sanders worth drafting. And then could Canales revive Sanders or Penny? I think Miles Sanders sucks. I just don't think he's a good player. Now he's a really good athlete. He can like in the past you could see him go the distance anytime he touched the ball, but he was running behind the Eagles offensive line. And I think like now that he doesn't have this elite blocking, again, it's gonna be a better blocking this year, but I just don't like Sanders enough as a player to draft him. What are your thoughts on Sanders?
I'm in a 32 team league where I drafted Sanders as a rookie and I will be dropping him.
No, okay. Interesting. Yeah. I just don't think he's a good player. I don't know what Canales could do with him. Maybe crazier things happen. I just don't see it though. E. Hoskin says, just feed me Gibbs. Yeah, I love Jahmyr Gibbs. By the way, Jahmyr Gibbs, I keep talking about Rainmakers. Jahmyr Gibbs' legendary Rainmaker card is $1,300 more than a Bijan Robinson a legendary Rainmaker card, which I thought was very strange. Although I think it might be because there's a chance Bijan Robinson is going to be tagged as a superstar, which we talked about that on Monday's show, where superstars aren't as valuable because you can only use one of them per lineup. So if you have Bijan, you can't put him in a lineup with Patrick Mahomes, for example. You can only run one superstar. So I can't see Gibbs being a superstar. So maybe that's the thinking there. Anyway. Yeah, so I love Rainmakers. So fun. Love T says Rashad Penny. LOL, just give me the money if that is the case. Yeah, it's someone to keep in mind if you're a degenerate like me and you do preseason DFS, maybe you put Penny in one of your lineups. But then again, they do have Mike Boone here, who was when he was with the Vikings, he was like the Walter Payton of the preseason. He was so
preseason done. Love Mike Boone.
He was so
I get
good.
excited about Mike Boone all the time. In every preseason, I'm like, oh, one injury and it's going to be Mike Boone time, baby, and it never happens.
Never.
But gosh, I
never.
love watching him.
I know I don't know why he's just so good in the preseason, but otherwise,
So fun to watch.
Yeah. I remember Mac Brown, that one preseason game he ran for Washington. It was like 160 rushing yards. It was like this week 4 of the preseason. They moved the game up because there's going to be a hurricane. It was like Washington versus Tampa. And this guy, Mac Brown for Washington, runs for 160 yards, like 2 touchdowns. I'm like watching this, like, oh my God, this guy's amazing. They're like, he's definitely going to make the roster, right? And so now they cut him the next day. It's so stupid. I don't know.
I can't possibly imagine why we're getting less preseason games.
No, so it's so useless. And those announcers, like, they're getting paid to say it, but they're like, this guy might make the team. Like, we're looking for diamonds in the rough for guys who are going to make the team. And then you have guy rushing for 160 yards and 2 touchdowns doesn't make the team. So you can't really buy what they're selling at this point. Yeah, it's I don't know. I think they have to go down to 2 preseason games. So we go to the Saints here, and man, my heart broke when I kind of realized that Jamal Williams is still on the team because I like Kendrick Miller as a prospect. the problem, and like Alvin Kamara is going to go down. Like he misses 3 or 4 games a year. That's what he does. So for a quarter of the season, you're going to be able to start a Saints backup. The problem is, like, who is it? Is it Jamal Williams or Kendrick Miller? I think it will be Miller, even though Williams is listed ahead of him. I think he has more talent. I know Williams had those like 18 touchdowns or whatever, that nonsense he had in Detroit in 2022, but the touchdowns don't mean anything. And he kind of looked washed up last year. I thought Miller had a good start at the end of the year. And so I think that might give him a leg up. But the problem is that you just don't know. And like if Kamara were to go down, it could be like 60-40 Miller to Williams. I think that could happen. And then Williams could get the goal line work. So it's a tough situation. If Williams weren't to make the team, if they cut him for some reason, then I suddenly would really like Kendrick Miller as a late round guy. But that's something you don't know. So if you draft, let's say you draft in like the middle of August, and you're obviously not going to draft one of these guys, but after the final roster cuts are made, if Williams doesn't make the team, Kendrick Miller is someone I'm going to scoop up immediately. So that's my thinking here. So what are your thoughts on the Saints?
Yeah, I feel the same way. There's a lot of reasons to be really nervous about Alvin Kamara. Obviously, there's the injury risk. There's the fact that a lot of his production came from checkdowns last season. There's the fact that they're using Taysom Hill in the backfield a little bit during training camp. There's the fact that he's holding out, wanting a new contract, despite the fact he's making $18 million this year. Admittedly, not a lot of it's guaranteed, and he's very injury prone. But still, there's enough issues there to make you think maybe something's going to happen here. I think Miller's more interesting in dynasty than anything more, because I expect that Jamal Williams will make the roster. They don't really have anything else behind those guys. Miller was clearly the number 3 running back last year. And while he might rise, I think if Kamara's out for whatever reason, you're going to get a committee. And you don't know exactly what that committee is going to look like. But the upside of your running backs is still going to be massively capped. So what's the point in taking a gamble on something with so little upside? So I know that Miller's very popular, but he's someone that I'll have 0 shares of. I'm just not interested.
Yeah, same here. Just you need Jamal Williams to just go away in some sort of fashion. We go to Tampa here, and Rachaad White's entrenched. You have 4th rounder Bucky Irving is ahead of Chase Edmonds on the depth chart, which is interesting. So maybe look at Bucky Irving. I want to see what he does in training camp in the preseason. If he looks great, then maybe you take a shot on him in the 14th round. But probably going to have better players to draft. But again, it really depends on how he looks. Like he could look amazing or something, and then suddenly you're drafting a sleeper here because I think Rachaad White's is a great receiver out of the backfield. I don't think he's that good of a runner. But I still think that's the job's his. It's not like he's going to lose it for performance. But if an injury were to happen and Irving looks great, then suddenly you'd want him. So maybe he turns into these like one of these stash guys early in the season, like Braylon Allen or something. But at the moment, right now, if I'm drafting right now, I wouldn't be drafting any other running back aside from Rachaad White. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was really interested in Bucky Irving when they announced that he was being taken there. My concern is he's not exactly a big back. He's fast. He's a really good receiver, I think. And so it is not impossible that he takes over the receiving role, which is a bit weird because White's traditionally been a pretty good receiver. I remember when he came out of college, I was a little bit worried about Rachaad White because he never got a lot of carries at Arizona State. He was always out there for only like 40 to 50% of the snaps. So I worried about whether he could handle a full load in the NFL. And he's proven he clearly can. So it's really interesting that they've decided to bring in Bucky Irving. I do wonder if he's simply as a backup because Sean Tucker's not worked out. Chase Edmonds hasn't worked out. They just felt like they needed to get an actual true backup in case White went down. Is Irving going to be an every down back in that situation? I don't know. I think they probably bring in a veteran or at least use some Edmonds. So he's not high on my list of backups, but he's someone that I'm interested in having on my roster, especially in a PPR dynasty league, because I feel like there's at least some James White style upside there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that. John asking, how's Kamara only 28? I feel like he's been around since the Abbott administration. Yeah, that's weird. He does seem like he's older. This is what his 8th year in the league coming up. So that's weird. So yeah, he entered the league like even before he could drink. So he's been around for a while. You're right.
Well, before he could drink in America, if he came to Australia, you can drink when you're 18, of course. So.
Wow. Okay. Something I didn't know. Yeah, I did. That used to be the law here. It used to be 18, and then Mothers Against Drunk Driving. They convinced. I forget who was it. It might have been Reagan. I'm not sure who it was. But they changed the law in the 80s. So I guess it was Reagan. So yeah, they changed it to 821, which seems odd that you can enlist in the army and you can't drink alcohol. Seems very strange to me.
Yeah, that is weird.
Yeah.
In fact, here you're legally allowed to drink if you're with your family. So it doesn't matter what age you are. You can be 6 years old, and if you're with your family, even if you're in public, you can still drink alcohol.
Okay, yeah, that's I always thought that should be the case, but yeah, I think if you can enlist in the military, then you should be able to drink. I think there should always be exceptions. Like if you enlist in the military, you should be able to. Like gambling is gambling 21 or 18 in Australia?
18. Everything. There's nothing that's not 18.
Yeah, why is it 21 here? Yeah, I always thought that if you enlist first responders or military, like all your rights, you should have everything at 18 or whenever you do it. I don't know. That's the way I thought, but I think everything should be 18 anyway. But,
yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. Lefty says Rachaad White is going to catch 70 plus passes. Yeah, I mean he's going to be great in PPR for sure.
Not if Irving takes that role.
True. Yeah. Charlie compared him to Tajay Spears. And yeah, you mentioned James White. Yeah, I think might be something in between. So that is something to monitor. He could be the third down back there. It's interesting. Although I mean White does have good receiving ability. Lefty says OMG bars can't even have the all you can drink specials anymore. It's they've gone a little too far as I'm concerned. So anyway, so we have 6 up, 2 down in this deep dive. We go to Denver, and man, Javonte Williams still listed as the starter despite Cecil Lammy's reporting. I think it's gonna be McLaughlin, but quite frankly, I don't really care. This team is gonna be dreadful. I think they might have the worst record in the NFL. So I just want to avoid everyone here. I have no interest in any player on the Broncos for as far as fantasy is concerned. I'm looking at this team. I'm just like, I don't want any receivers. I don't want the tight ends. I don't want any of the running backs. No, I mean, if McLaughlin drops to I don't know where he's going. I should probably look that up. But I can't imagine that he's going. Yeah, he's
very
going.
late.
Yeah, 159 overall, which is the 14th round. So. Okay, yeah, if he's named the starter, maybe, but even still, it's like, what is he going to do here? Like 60 yards, no touchdowns every game, like that. I feel like that's in his future. There's so many running backs here. If P. Ryan's going to get the passing down work. Williams, if he makes the roster, he's going to be worked in. Estime is a rookie. You don't know what you're going to get out of him. So I don't know. I don't want anyone on this team. What are your thoughts on Denver?
I think to myself, imagine what would happen if tomorrow Javonte Williams gets announced as being off the roster and Jaleel McLaughlin is definitely 100% the starter. No doubt. He is the starter. P. Ryan's the third down back and Estime is the backup. I still don't think that I'd want Jaleel McLaughlin on my team. I think I'd probably be drafting him in like the 9th round. So under what circumstance would I actually want to draft him given this situation? Well, I'd want to have terrible running backs on my roster. And obviously I don't want that, but that would have to be the situation where I've gone heavy 0 RB and I just need somebody who might start week 1. So I'm looking at Chuba Hubbard. I'm looking at Jaleel McLaughlin. I'm looking at guys that just have more chance at being a starter than anybody else, even if they're a terrible starter. That would be the situation where I want McLaughlin on my roster. The other reason I can imagine doing it, if you've got, say, I don't know, a 12-person bench in a dynasty league, McLaughlin's someone you can pick up because he is available in a lot of dynasty leagues, because there's going to be some idiot in your league who'll see the first week, sees the starter, and then want to buy that guy from you. So he's got some sell value, and that's about it.
That's interesting. Yeah, you could probably draft him late and then trade him for something better. That's a good point. But I have no interest in keeping these guys on my roster, I should say. It's maybe the better way to put it. Sue says nickel beer night at the old ball game. Man, that's quite a time, huh? Yeah, things were much cheaper before they started printing $540 million per day. The Federal Reserve here. It's a very, very, very weird decision making that we just go along with for some reason. Actually, it's, so I was at my sister-in-law's for the 4th, and it happened to be my nephew's birthday. He just turned 10, and his grandparents gave him $100. And he was talking. I overheard him talking to his dad. I joined the conversation, but his dad was like, man, like when I was a kid, he's my age. He's like $100, you'd be able to buy two new video games and a used video game, and now you're just buying one video game and maybe a skin for it, and that's it. It's kind of depressing where it's gone. and the nephew looks so downtrodden. Like he's like, it's like, what do I do with this $100 now? It's a different time, unfortunately. But
that's absolutely crazy. When I was a kid, if I got $5, I would be like absolutely, and that's $5 Australian dollars, which is like $2.50 American. I would have been absolutely over the moon. It would have been the best thing that ever happened when I was 10 years old. So that's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I used to I'd get like $20 for mowing the lawn a few times or whatever, and then I go to like the sports card store and I pick out like 6 or 7 packs of either football or basketball cards to open. It was such a good time. Like I go with my friends and like we'd see what each other would open, and like I don't know how you do that now. He says 25 cents draws at the old bar. Crazy. Broncos might lead the league in 3 and outs. Yes, I would imagine so. I think they're going to be the worst offensive team in the NFL. And their defense is not going to be as good. At least a couple years ago, they had a good defense, but now I think they were 23rd or 24th or something in EPA last year. The defense was. So yeah, so it's not, you can't even say that they're a great defensive team. It's just different.
Did you see Cecil Lammy's report that he sees them going 9-7 this season?
Wow, that's I disagree with that. I love Cecil, but
that was my reaction as well. I was like, I mean, look, I know you know what they tell you, but that's a Homer report if ever I've seen one.
Jeez, yeah. I mean, all respect to Cecil. He's as far as I'm concerned, one of the 2 best team reporters out there. It's so good, but we will disagree on that projection, respectfully. John says, I feel for Broncos fans: Lynch, Osweiler, Simeon, Keenum, Locke, Bridgewater, Wilson, and now Nix. The Manning curse turned into the Manning curse. Yeah, it's been pretty rough. It's almost like they sold their souls for Manning. It's like, let's get one more Super Bowl, and then you go through it's like what is that? Like you break a mirror, you get 7 years bad luck, and you get Peyton Manning, you get 9 years of terrible quarterbacking. Who knows? Maybe Bo Nix is going to be better than we think, but I don't think so.
I mean, you look at that list and you got to think it's a very low bar. To be fair, I actually quite like Teddy Bridgewater. He's probably my favorite on that whole list, so that's depressing.
He was great against the spread. Bridgewater, great spread record. He has, at least he has that going for him. And if his career wasn't wrecked by injuries, I think he'd still be pretty good. It's just unfortunate. Johnson 9-7, not 10-7. I don't know. Maybe 9-7-1, perhaps.
Yeah, 9-8. It was probably 9-8. I can't remember. Okay. There was the 7 in there somewhere and 9 in there somewhere. I don't know.
Okay, it'd be ballsy if he predicted a tie. It's like
9-7-1. That'd be real bold. Yeah. You got a good point there.
That'd be funny. Lefty says, my girlfriend's nephew comes over all the time. He loves thrift stores. You'll be shocked at how cheap cool toys are. Yeah, you can get some cheap stuff for sure at thrift stores. Yeah, but the regular stuff is so expensive now. Lefty says Denver is going to be bad. However, with the first pick in the 25 draft, the Giants select. So it's weird. I don't know. I just feel like Denver's going to have the worst record because they play in the AFC. I think if you swap the Giants and Broncos, I think the Giants will have the worst record. The Giants will have some easier games than the Broncos. Like the Broncos will have this gauntlet of tough opponents every single week. Whereas the Giants will have some soft teams to play against at least. So that's my thinking there. All right. So we moved to Kansas City and we have Isaiah Pacheco's entrenched. You have Clyde Edwards-Helaire as the top backup, Deneric Prince, Keontae Ingram, a bunch of guys you never heard of after that. And Edwards-Helaire, once upon a time, remember that first game he had? And the first game of the season, he was so good, and then he just he just got worse and worse after that. It feels like he gets worse every year. It's kind of like AJ Dillon in that regard. So I don't know. I feel like if Pacheco goes down, and I think you said this on the show, right? Like they might bring in someone. They just don't really have much here. I don't know if Jerick McKinnon's they bring him back. So I don't want Edwards-Helaire on my roster.
I actually do.
You do? Okay.
Partly because I had him in college fantasy in 2019, and he had like 3 50-point games. He was absolutely insane. But I do think that he's the clear backup here. There's no one else there really that I think would even see the field in a notable way if Pacheco went down. I feel like they probably just give it to Edwards-Helaire. He knows the offense. He's going to do a reliable job. They don't need an amazing running back. So I feel like there's at least a little bit of upside there, and there's certainly no one threatening him for that role. I have no idea who the number 3 is. I actually kind of like Louis Rees-Zammit. He's actually a very good runner. He was an excellent rugby player. So I think it could be interesting to see how he develops over the next few years, but you wouldn't roster him. I think that it's Edwards-Helaire and no one else. For that reason, he goes a lot higher than a lot of guys where there's not that same clarity.
Yeah, McKinnon just checked he's a free agent. So I think if Pacheco were to go down, I think they'd bring him back.
I think they would, but I still think he's only the passing down back. And I think Edwards-Helaire is still a guy that you would be able to start. I feel like if Pacheco doesn't play at all this season, if he went down in like the last preseason game or something like that, and even if they brought McKinnon back, I feel like Edwards-Helaire still finishes as a top 20, top 25 running back.
Okay. Interesting. We'll see. So Lefty says LRZ is going to tell the tale if he makes the team. They keep four backs. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see how he does in the preseason at the very least.
I'm not sure if he's a free roster spot because he's international. I'm not sure how that works, but I think if you go through the international player pathway, you get a free roster spot in certain situations.
Okay.
So it is possible that he'll make the roster just as a free spot.
Okay.
Not sure about that, but I have seen that happen.
Okay. That's interesting. Vegas here. So Madison was brought up before. He was so bad last year, and I was shocked by how bad he was because he looked good when he's backing up Dalvin Cook, but as we saw when Dalvin Cook left, and he was not good. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of Madison. I don't quite know what to make of Zamir White. He's the favorite to be the starter, but I don't think that's like concrete. Like, it wouldn't shock me if it's someone else. It's probably gonna be him. But you just don't know. He just doesn't have much experience. There's Amir Abdullah, who's gonna be like the third down back. You have Dylan Lobby, maybe him. But yeah, I don't know how I'm excited about the situation. What are your thoughts on the Raiders' backfield here?
I feel like Zamir White is very safely entrenched as the first and second down back. I don't think that Madison's truly going to threaten him. I think White looked absolutely fantastic when given the opportunity. I feel like that this is a solid O-line to run behind. I think that he's going to be very productive in non-PPR, but no one plays non-PPR anymore. So I feel like in a half PPR or a PPR league, he turns into that, like, I don't know, RB20 or something like that, where he's got a relatively safe role. If he gives you a touchdown, he's probably going to get 90 yards and a touchdown, and then you've got 15 points and you're happy. But there are going to be weeks where they struggle and they can't run the ball, and then he's only going to give you 3 or 4 points. And that's kind of the downside of starting someone like a Zamir White. I think that they're going to have a clear third down back for most of the season. I don't know if it's going to be Abdullah or Lauby. I feel like it's a competition between those two to be the third down back. They previously had someone else in there as well. I can't remember who right now that was kind of battling with Amir Abdullah, and Abdullah kind of won out, but he still wasn't very good. So I think that's why they drafted Lauby. And I think even if White goes down, Madison probably takes over White's role, but then you still have a third down back in Abdullah or Lauby to take all that passing work. So for that reason, I think Madison's upside is limited because you're only going to get Zamir White, but Madison's worse. So you're going to get worse production than White would. So I'm not particularly interested in Madison, though he is at least clearly got a role if there's an injury. But I am interested in White. I feel like he could be interesting because he's falling in a lot of drafts.
His ADP is 704 right now. So, I mean, if you think he's entrenched, then yeah, I think it's great value. I mean, he looked good at the end of last year. Just, I guess, just given the lack of experience, just kind of hesitant to trust him. But 7th round doesn't seem that bad.
I think best ball he might be interesting as well because he's going to have those boom weeks. They're going to have some really run heavy weeks, so that makes him interesting. if you're going 0 RB, I would love him to be my first running back if I've got
Mhm.
everyone else absolutely loaded.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I think he's better in best ball too. Hey, Lefty says Kansas City used that exception on tackle. However, they did give LRZ a decent signing bonus. So yeah, maybe he makes the team for that reason. Okay. All right. So we go to the Chargers and don't quite know who's the starter. I guess it's J.K. Dobbins. Could be Gus Edwards. You brought up that they gave Edwards more money, so maybe he gets the nod initially. There's Kamani Vidal, the 6th-round rookie. I personally, I think Dobbins has a ton of upside. I know that his floor is rather low just because of the injuries he suffered over the years. But he's now 2 years removed from the torn ACL, and like really the injury last year to his Achilles was pretty predictable because running backs who try to come back early from torn ACLs, they generally suffer some sort of other injuries. Like this happened to Saquon Barkley, where he in the second year he got banged up, and other running backs as well. J.K. Dobbins' ADP is 1309, which is I feel like it's way too late given his talent level, and plus the Chargers want to run the ball here, so I think that of all the running backs here, like if Edwards is considered the starter, I think Dobbins is a premium backup for sure. Just because it has to be someone, right? Like this team lost so much production from Austin Eckler and Keenan Allen. Like they sucked up so many targets. So even just like passing wise, like a lot of those passes are going to turn to runs because they want to run more. And they drafted Joe Alt here, so. I don't know. I think it has to be someone, and Dobbins has the most talent. So I will be looking into Dobbins late in the draft. What are your thoughts here?
Every time I do a running back video, I get a heap of comments about the Chargers, even if I don't talk about the Chargers. I think people are really interested in this backfield because they understand that there's going to be a lot of runs for the Chargers this year. I think they're going to go very, very, very run heavy. But I also think it's worth noting that there's no one that's going to replace Austin Eckler here. There is not going to be a passing down back. There has not been a single Harbaugh team in the last, how long has he been coaching NFL adjacent stuff? 15, 20 years? Mm-hmm. He's never had a team where a running back's got more than 36 receptions. He just doesn't use running backs in the passing game at all, even if they're capable of doing it. So you're certainly not looking for someone to take that role for him. A lot of those checkdowns would go to the tight ends and go to Ladd McConkey. So I feel like you've got to think who is going to get the actual carries. Gus Edwards is probably the best pure running back here at the moment because of Dobbins' injuries. I just don't know that we've seen that Dobbins can still be as explosive as he was, and that really scares me off. So Edwards is the guy that I'd feel most safe about taking, but I feel like that if Dobbins is healthy, he's going to massively outproduce his ADP. Is he going to outproduce it enough so that he's someone that can win you your league? I don't think so. I think even if Dobbins was 100% healthy, we'd still see him getting at most 50 to 60% carries, and he turns into maybe the running back 20 or something like that. And that's the upside there. So I feel like none of these guys have true upside. I know that a lot of people are taking Vidal late because they see him as someone that's got potential, but he's a 6th-round running back, and we've seen that they don't have a great success rate. I think he's still clearly behind the other two. I wouldn't be surprised if Spiller gets involved a little bit in passing downs as well, or Dotson. I just think this is going to be super messy, and I don't really want any of these guys. But if I had to take someone, I'd take Edwards if I was going 0 RB, and I'd take Dobbins if it was late rounds, and I wanted someone with moderate upside because I'm not feeling good about my running backs.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I like Dobbins more than you, but like that, I will definitely recognize the injury risk there. It's pretty massive, but yeah, when you're talking 13th round, it's not much of a risk anyhow. You know, it's all upside, I think. So, all right, let's go to the last division. We have Arizona here. James Conner is there, but he tends to get hurt, and they drafted Trey Benson in the 3rd round. I like Benson. I thought he would go in the 2nd round. So yeah, he's someone that you're definitely going to monitor in your fantasy drafts. The problem is he's going way earlier than some of these other running backs we've talked about. His ADP right now is 1001, which is like probably where I'm taking my quarterback in round 10, round 9, round 10. So I don't think he's going to quite get to me in like round 11. But if does, I will have interest because, like I said, Connor does tend to get hurt, and if Connor goes down, it's going to be the Trey Benson show. I just don't really see these other guys. DJ Dallas is not going to get touches. Michael Carter, and they tried DeMarcado last year, it didn't quite work out. The fact that like they had to use DeMarcado last year, I think that was that prompted that Benson pick. I just think they wanted better depth there. So. Yeah, I like I said, I like Benson as a prospect. He's drafted early, and Connor will get hurt at some point. So, this is one of the better backups, I think. So, what's your stance on Benson, or if you like anyone else here?
There was a really interesting report on NFL on NBC by Johnny Venerable, who was talking about, and he's a big Cardinals guy. He was saying that James Conner is definitively the number one back. They love him. He's one of their best players. His change of pace back is going to be Michael Carter, and Michael Carter is going to do some third down work and be the change of pace back. You'll hardly see Trey Benson at all this year. And then next year, James Conner becomes a free agent and Trey Benson becomes the starting back and takes over from that role. And he said that if James Conner gets injured, Trey Benson becomes the starting back. I don't 100% agree with that whole report, but it is an interesting perspective to think that Benson is literally a Connor replacement and only a Connor replacement. He's not going to be taking different roles away, and they're going to have someone else come in and do the change of pace stuff. That doesn't really massively affect how I view Benson, because I don't think you're starting him if Connor is healthy. I think there's going to be some sort of committee, but Connor's still going to be the main guy. And I feel like early on in the season, he's going to be productive. I've got Connor in a heap of dynasty leagues, but I don't particularly want him anymore, because I think that as the season goes on, Benson's very slowly going to take over his role. And if the Cardinals aren't in playoff contention all of a sudden, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they just give Benson a go. And all of a sudden you're in the fantasy playoffs and you had James Conner and he's no longer useful to you. So that scares me off absolutely everyone in this backfield. I like Conner for the talent. I feel like he could be very productive early in the season, but unless you're getting him in that 7th, 8th, 9th round region, he's not someone I'm interested in. And Trey Benson, because there's not a very clear path to definitively every down roles, I think you're probably going to have to pay too much to get him onto your team to make him that backup.
Yeah, he's going too early. Here's a hypothetical for you, which is kind of stupid because it's not going to happen. But if so, we talked about how much we like Algier, especially in the 14th round. What if Algier was going in the 10th round like Benson, and Benson was going in the 14th round like Algier? Who would you like more at that range?
I think in that situation, I'd take Benson, because I try to avoid taking backup running backs in the 10th round. I feel like you can still get some quality backup wide receivers there, and I'd rather get my running backs in the 12th to 14th round. So in that case, I'd go with Benson.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Love T said, we admit Justin Herbert's overrated. Why does he always get a pass? Well, I mean, he's super talented, and he's been coached by some dreadful coaches. Just guys who don't know what they're doing. Now, if he disappoints under Harbaugh, then we're talking about something different here. But yeah, and plus, like, his supporting cast always gets hurt too. So I feel like a lot has changed. A lot has like hurt him in that regard. And plus, like, the Chargers are a mess of an organization too. So I feel like he does well given the circumstances, you know.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know that the talent is overrated, but I think the production is overrated. And I certainly think people have too high expectations each season on what you're going to get out of him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, he does commercials like Mahomes. So yeah, it's at least that going for him. All right, we are going to our anti-penultimate team, the Niners. You have Christian McCaffrey, obviously, and then you have a bunch of running backs. You have Elijah Mitchell, Isaiah Guerrero, Patrick Taylor, Jordan Mason. If McCaffrey were to get hurt, then Mitchell is the favorite, and I feel like everyone would rush to get Mitchell, and then they would cry when like Guerrero or Frank or Jordan Mason gets the touches. So this is not a situation I want. Like, despite the volume that you get out of the running backs, like, this is the same thing as Miami. It's just like they have McCaffrey. Like, if Miami had McCaffrey, it'd be a different deal too. It's just like they love using multiple running backs unless they have the superstar. So I'm not touching anyone else here. What are your thoughts?
There was a report recently, I think it was actually on NFL on NBC as well, where the suggestion was that Isaac Guerrero will only play special teams this year. You will not see him otherwise. And I think that makes sense until Chris McCaffrey gets injured. If McCaffrey gets injured, I think it's going to be all hands on deck. They have clearly shown they're not really willing to give Elijah Mitchell the load. I don't think Mitchell's really a true every down back. I don't think he has the passing chops to make that work either. So I feel like Mitchell has limited upside because it's a high scoring offense, because he would be the starter in that case. But I feel like even if McCaffrey went down right now, where is Mitchell going to be drafted? I think probably too high. I think he probably deserves to be drafted somewhere around the 6th round or something like that. And I think that's probably what you'd expect to get from him if McCaffrey goes down, because you're going to see enough of Garendo and Mason to be inconvenient. And probably Patrick Taylor as well, who can be a pretty good receiving back as well. So for that reason, Mitchell's one of my lower late round guys. He's probably 13th or 14th if I had to list all the backups. And so you're definitely going to find someone better unless you're in a really deep dynasty league where you just need some backup to put on your bench.
You know what happened? Like I said, in that scenario, everyone would get Mitchell. Garendo would get most of the carries. Everyone dumps Mitchell. They pick up Garendo, and then next week Mitchell gets most of the carries. Like that's what these teams do. Just can't trust that. All right. We move to the Seahawks, and I mean, they have one of the better backups in the NFL as well as far as like opportunity is concerned. You have Kenneth Walker as the starter, but then you have Zach Charbonnet. So like, if Walker gets hurt, you're going to have Charbonnet. Charbonnet is currently being drafted at 128 overall, which is the 11th round, which I think is like appropriate for him. I don't think I'm going to be getting Charbonnet now. If he falls to the 13th round, suddenly he'll be on some of my teams. But I think the range to draft him is correct. So I just don't see the value. What are your thoughts here?
Here's some random trivia for you. If you had to guess, over the last 5 weeks of the season when both of those running backs were healthy, what do you reckon Zach Charbonnet's average snap count was, like as a percentage?
Well, I assume it's going to be higher than I think, but I would say without any bias, I would I'll say I do remember them splitting touches. Maybe I'm misremembering. I would say 35%, 35%. That's what I guess.
50%.
Wow.
He was ahead of Walker in about half of the weeks last season. So in week 8, week 9, week 10, week 11, Walker got injured. And then again in week 17 and 18, he had a higher snap count than Walker. Now, he wasn't getting touches, but he was on the field. He was essentially out there on pretty much every passing down. So they basically used Walker as the running back and then Charbonnet as the defensive blocking back. But he still got plenty of touches and carries because of that. Ultimately, there were still weeks, even when he was playing 50% snaps, where he was only getting 2 rushes. So they were really signaling what they were doing based on the running back that they had out there, which I think was a really strange strategy. So I don't know what to make of how that all works, but I do still think that if Walker goes down, Charbonnet just becomes the guy, because look at who else they have. And that makes him significantly more valuable than most of the other guys. I think if Walker was out, Charbonnet probably goes in around the 3rd round, probably 3rd or 4th round. And for that reason, he's someone that you draft after an Algier or a Braylon Allen for me personally. But I still like him more than most of the upside running backs we've talked about.
It's a great stat on Charbonnet. So they have a different coaching staff. We'll see what they do. But yeah, I mean, he's a premium backup, but a little too early for my liking. Are you going to get him in the 11th round, or is like maybe if he falls to you, obviously take him? Like,
there's always going to be someone I like more. I generally don't start taking upside running backs that early, but if there's no one else I like there, I might take him knowing that I can still get other guys I like later on. So I can imagine situations where I might do it. I think he's probably in my top 6 like late round upside running backs. And for that reason, if 1 or 2 of my favorite guys went, I might take him there knowing I can get other guys I like later on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, John bringing up they changed coordinators. Yeah, we'll see what they do differently, but they did draft him in the 2nd round, and the front office is still there, so he's still a guy they like. Although they did once upon a time.
He won't get that same usage. He won't get the same usage in the same way they did last season, but it is clear that at least the general perception there was this is a guy who is good in pass protection, who can be used on passing downs, and I think that's productive. I think that's useful.
Yeah, I was about to say they did once upon a time they did draft Rashad Penny in the first round. So maybe we shouldn't put too much stock into where they drafted him, but still, yeah,
And then use Chris Carson, of course.
And they yeah right Chris Carson, yeah. So yeah, I mean we'll see what happens, but at least I think right now the front office still likes him. Last team we have the Rams, and I think that you agree, and I do recall you talking about Blake Corum. We talked about Algier being the best, one of the better backups. I think Corum has to be on that list as well. His current ADP is 10, looks like 1008. And I think it's fine because Kyren Williams has an extensive injury history. You just can't trust him at all. Remember in week 1 of 2022, there was a report from Schefter saying that they were going to use Kyren Williams in the game against Buffalo. And then he got hurt either on the kickoff or something. He got hurt like in the first snap or something, and they just weren't able to use him. And then last year he was great, and then he got hurt, and he came back again. Then he got hurt again, and then he came back. Like this guy always is hurt, and I believe he has a foot issue right now as well. So this is someone you can't trust, and if he's healthy, I mean, I love him, but. It's almost guaranteed he's going to miss time this year. And if that happens, they have Blake Corum. They drafted him early. He was a superstar in Michigan, and really, there's no one else. Like, who are they going to play instead? Like Boston Scott, Ronnie Rivers, Zach Evans. Like, they're not going to play these guys. So it's going to be Blake Corum. So yeah, I mean, 10th round. I have interest there. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, there's been a lot of reports about Rams running backs, and they're very contradictory. So you get some reports that says Blake Corum's going to be really involved. And there's been other reports saying Kyren Williams is definitively the starter. He's going to have a very similar role to last time. Blake Corum's just a breather back. Williams is the starter, and they absolutely love him. And that may be true, but no matter how much you love a guy, at some point you have to acknowledge that he's getting injured constantly. In the last 2 years, he's had a broken foot. He's had 2 high ankle sprains, and now he's got another foot injury. That's in addition to a hip injury and I think a shoulder injury. He's had a little bit of everything. So for that reason, I can't trust Kyren Williams to stay healthy. I think he's going to be extremely productive when he is healthy, and I think he's still someone that you can take in the first couple of rounds. But realistically, Corum not only has the clearest path to a job from an injury perspective, he's also got the most upside job if Williams goes down with injury. Because all of a sudden, they've been very clear. Blake Corum is an every down back, and they're going to use him like an every down back if the opportunity arises. So for that reason, you're going to get every down production. If Kyren Williams went down now, Blake Corum would be a borderline first-round pick. There is going to be a massive amount of upside because all of a sudden you don't have to worry about someone else threatening his production. So I love the upside of Corum. He is, I believe, my second-ranked late-round running back, and the only guy ahead of him is Jerome Ford because I think Jerome Ford might already be the starter. So purely from an upside perspective, Corum is my favorite.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, he's super talented. It's great opportunity, better opportunity than Algier in Atlanta because, it's like Bijan doesn't have this injury history. So, yeah, we both like Blake Corum here a lot. Sue with the 704 super chat. Thank you so much, Sue. Really appreciate it. He says, since I don't need to buy 70 paper bags at my local grocer, I'll use that money for a super chat. Happy Independence Day to all. Yeah, thanks so much. So yeah, the story here is that one of the counties near me, not quite my county, but like the one where I do some shopping sometimes, they've gotten rid of plastic bags and now they offer paper bags. But you have to pay 10 cents per paper bag. Which they do it on the kiosk, and like if you use a paper bag, they ask you like, how many bags have you used? I always click 0. I'm not paying for this. I'm not paying 10 cents for this. So I'm a rebel here, a true rebel. Yeah, it's absurd. And I kind of I talked about the people on the county board who made these decisions. I kind of in my jerks of the week, I kind of tried to get to it was. It's funny because I was hanging out with my friend yesterday for his birthday, and he when I walked into his house, he starts laughing. He's like, "Well, I read your jerks of the week. You doxed everyone on the county board." I'm like, "Well, their names are out there. I didn't out them. Like their names, like you could just easily just Google it. Like their names are there." But he thought it was funny. But yeah, it was frustrating because like one of my paper bags broke and like a glass of like I think it was spaghetti sauce just slipped, like fell on the ground and splattered. And it's like if I had paper bags, this wouldn't have happened, you know. So I don't know. I was quite annoyed by this whole situation. So that is the reference there.
I get you. In Australia, they've outlawed one-use plastic bags. It's just
really
it's illegal for the supermarkets to give you one-use plastic bags. So they made it so that you had to pay for reusable plastic bags, and they were charging like 25 Australian cents, which is, or maybe even more, which is what, like 15 US cents or something like that. But you only get 3 or 4 uses out of them, and then they break holes in them, and there's like little sharp things on the places where you stack your stuff. It's a nightmare. And so they went, oh, that's not working anymore. We'll go to paper bags. And then they did exactly what you said. If you put anything wet in them, all of a sudden it just falls through the first time you use them.
It's horrible.
And so they stopped doing that. And then they started getting you to use like reusable canvas bags that cost you like $1.50 each to use them, and you have to try to bring them back every time. And I always forget to bring them, so they have to buy new ones. And gosh, look, to be fair, it could be worse, but I am on the train with you that is really stupid.
Yeah, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab like a bunch of those regular plastic bags, put them in my car. And then whenever I go, I'm gonna have these plastic bags, and people will look at me. They're like, "Wait, how'd you get these?" I guarantee you, like questions to that. Exactly. Yeah. That's my plan. So we'll see what happens, but that's my goal here. Just I don't know. It's like the one county. It's like across the streets of CVS, and it's the same thing. They like the woman was trying to charge me for 10 cents, and like screw off. I'm not doing this. So. For this paper bags, but they always have the kiosk. Like, how many bags do you do? I always pick 0. So standing up to the man here. Lusty says, I love the way the Rams run their business. OP. Yeah, the Rams have a great front office for sure. And Walter, not a jerk. Yes. I don't know where you reference there. Am I not the jerk, or is the county board not the jerks? I don't know. I hope I am not the jerk in this situation. Although,
I think that's what
yeah, no, I would say this. I knew this girl once upon a time, a long time ago. But I was at a wedding, and I was talking to her, and she goes up to me. She's like, well, in your jerks of the week, you're the jerk, right? I'm like, yeah, I probably, yes. But I'm like, I don't care. I'm like, I don't care. That's the whole point. And the jerks of the week was called Paper or Paper, because you have no choice. Sue says plastic, no paper sounds like a fun t-shirt, like a future t-shirt. Yes, I will. Yeah, I want to. Yeah, I'll do something like that. Yes, that's a good idea. So I'll have to think about it. But yeah,
zero paper bags.
0 paper. Yeah. Always choose 0 or something like that. Yeah. I'll think about it. I'll brainstorm it and make a t-shirt of some sort. So yeah, thanks for suggestions, Sue, and thank you so much for the super chat. But yeah, that's it. We went through all 32 teams. We found some good sleepers for you, I think, and hopefully you guys draft them at some point in the late rounds of your fantasy drafts. But yeah, please hit like, subscribe, comment below, share this video, visit the link in the description for the merch store, and also visit ffdfantasyfootball.com for some great content here. Also, you have the Fantasy First Down YouTube channel, which I mentioned. I watched a couple of you have these late round running backs. You actually posted a video. I think if I reload the page, it'll be there, because I think it was like today. Yeah, the Fantasy Football Risers and Fallers. I was listening to that today during my drive over to my sister-in-law's house and back. So great videos here. I highly recommend you guys subscribe to the Fantasy First Down. Do you want to talk some more about your YouTube channel and your website?
Yeah, look, absolutely, please. Any support you can give me on the YouTube channel is awesome. I only started it a couple of months ago, and I'm really enjoying it. It's just great to talk about fantasy, great to get people's thoughts on it, great to be able to put some different content out and try some different things. So definitely head over there and give it a listen. If you like it, please subscribe and keep hitting us up on that. The other thing I'm doing as well, I know a lot of people are getting ready for their dynasty drafts or thinking about their redraft drafts. I offer personalized rankings. So one of the biggest things that annoy me about fantasy in general is that you go online And you get these rankings that rank players against other positions, and it's totally irrelevant to your league because you're starting a third wide receiver, or you're using half PPR, or you've got a different bench space. I will personalize my rankings to your specific league settings for a very small fee as well. So make sure you hit me up on Instagram, Twitter, or you can email me at benwasley23@gmail.com if you're interested in getting some personalized rankings for your drafts.
Yeah, sounds great. Definitely recommend you guys do that. Last comment here. Luke Lutzy says not jerk of the week. Nick Riquetta, on the other hand, he's the lawyer who got arrested, right? So yeah, maybe him, not me. So thank you, Lutzy. So I love having you on, Ben. Always a blast to talk fantasy with you. Hopefully we do that in the coming weeks. I know your vacation's about to end, but hopefully in a few weeks or next month at some point we can do a fantasy draft. I'm sure we'll keep in touch, and we'll have you on at some point in the near future, hopefully. So once again, guys, thank you so much for commenting, watching. Really appreciate it, especially to Slew for the 704 super chat. Thank you so much, Slew. Once again, I hope you guys had a great July 4th. I hope you guys have a great weekend coming up. We'll be back on Saturday with Tom, and we'll be talking about the Reigns of Castamere episode, which I just rewatched the other night, and I'm like, oh man. So I don't know if Tom's still listening, but if you are, Tom, go watch that episode, and then you can tell me what you think, and we'll discuss it on Saturday amongst other things. So yeah, guys, we'll be talking to you in a couple of days, and hope you have a great start to your weekend. I'll talk to you later.